Well, there's just one line. Don't
Okay.
Oh, I've got your statement to read, and then we can get started. You got to read the statement. Yeah, we're ready to turn it on.
Got it. This regularly scheduled meeting of the Engineer Committee of the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners is taking place in Room 1B of the Davie Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. A notice of this committee meeting was posted on the board website on July 28, 2017. Mr.
Roll call. Ricky Bursine. Here. Robert Campbell.
Here.
Stephen King.
Here.
Philip Lim. Laura Reinbold. Catherine Ware. You have a quorum.
If there's no objection, we will go out of order on the agenda and wait on applications and audits for review, discussion, and signature until Ms. Ware gets here. She's running a little bit late. I don't see any reason why we can't go ahead and do NCAAS annual meeting motion. Well, she's going to that too. Let's see. Let's go to unfinished business. I think that's a good idea. Electronic seals and signatures requirements. Mr. Cothran? Oh, Mr. Campbell.
That's fine,
Sorry.
that's fine.
No. I meant,
Yeah, so I got, and I don't know that I forwarded it to everybody. I got an email from Jennifer Lloyd at TDOT, and if you don't mind, let me just read it real quick so that I don't paraphrase too much. It says TDOT continues to review options for final sealed set of plans. We feel the best solution will be to have a signature sheet that houses the sealed signature for all engineers. If this method is used, it would remove the current process of making a portfolio, which contains all the sealed sheets. Their portfolios are time consuming, make it very difficult to open and view in a timely manner. The portfolio method is currently the only method that will combine sealed sheets into one document. If the signature sheet is used, we will continue to have the stamp with the date and signatures currently shown on each of the set of plans using a watermark. The seal and the signature will show the PE stamp, date, and name. If there are several PEs contributing, each will send their sealed sheets in to the project delivery manager, and then they will combine all the sheets and distribute the signature sheets to the other PEs. Those PEs will place their seal on the signature sheet and list the specific sheets they sealed. Then the project delivery manager will combine all the sheets and plan and put the final thing on. So basically, it's what we talked about last time where we have the one signature sheet. It's kind of the Florida thing. They're going to add a watermark on there so that it makes it more obvious that somebody has signed the sheet and it's not just a copy. And that's a document control issue that they've got, because if not, you could go make a copy without some sort of watermark on it and it just be somebody could have swapped a sheet in and out. And that's really on them when you start looking at it. And that's, again, the way Florida looks at it is once you make a copy of something, it's on the people who took ownership of it, and the registrants kind of out of the document control business, because, we frankly can't go, if somebody makes a copy of our work and then wants to change something with whiteout or something, it's impossible for the registrant to go keep up with that long term. I know Steve deals with this with the city of Knoxville. I think y'all have a red stamp copy that kind of signifies that it's the official set. And so it would be something similar to that process, but all the signatures would be on the second page. I think it's called a signature page.
watermark is the red stamp?
No, it creates a watermark.
Okay.
Just it's
That's-
not really a
that's the
red
bottom.
stamp, but it's something
No,
but
red
that's
stamp.
similar to what they use.
Okay.
So what I want to encourage is in Miami, the Florida people, obviously, that wrote their law will be there. If we can, let's try to pigeonhole them for just a little bit. Very knowledgeable. He made a great presentation that I think I forwarded it to everybody. I just kind of talked to them a little bit about ins and outs and kind of get comfortable. TDOT's moving, it seems like, more and more in that direction, because those portfolios really are massive, and they take sometimes hours to open up. And so all you're really doing on some level is encouraging people to not go with signed and sealed documents, because it takes so long to get the information they need from the signed and sealed.
I understand, so you got a set of drawings, it's 500 drawings, and there's going to be one drawing up front that all the signatures and shows what sheets belong to. When you go to sheet 427, is there a way, will the seal, or is that where you're saying the watermark
That's where the
is?
watermark should be.
And the
Yes.
watermark is something that indicates that it's been stamped and signed, and that's the copy? Okay.
And understand, and I'll shut up after this, this is not going to be a tool for everybody, it's just an option, and it's going to be an option for those that do mass amounts of plans and keep up with it. I mean, you guys, I certainly could see may want to as you go to electronic stuff. TDOT's talking about storing all this in a common, password protected area, so that when you go as a contractor and you want to say, I want to look at the most current set of plans, they've got somebody that's responsible for making sure those stay in that area, so that you're not, but again, it's a document control issue at that point. It's really not a registering issue. I think we're going to be okay as long as there is that method to say, I'm an engineer and I did sheets 27 through 32, and here's what I did, which is what that signatory sheet does. The big deal is for guys like you that deal with, 10 sheets, and a codes official, for instance, is used to looking at a seal on your sheets. I don't know if that's the case in the TDOT world, because they've got contractors that are looking at electronic files almost exclusively now. And the seal is not as, as long as it's part of the approved set, it's not as big a deal.
I mean, the two sides, the registrant side that you talk about, having the signature page is one thing, but the other, it's important for anybody using the drawings that they know what is the final stamped sheet, because with electronics now, there are, versions of the set, and you need to be looking at the right sheet. So as long as you can tell.
Yeah, and I think again, that's on the person doing the document control, not the registrant, and we're responsible for the because they do so much and they've got such a big ability to do that.
Yeah.
I think they can manage the document control side, and this watermark helps them to verify that is a sheet that just wasn't ad hoc. I didn't pull out his truck and put in the sheet set and say, oh, by the way, here's how it should be built.
How is the watermark controlled?
I think when you create the set, it puts the watermark on there, because they're going to do it in smaller bundles too. I've not seen all that yet,
Okay.
but she's talked a little bit about it, and she would love to come and talk to us at some point, but they want to get things a little further along, just so they're not giving us 7 things to go look at. It's kind of their one final plan, but it looks like so far it meets what other states are doing too. So
Ultimately, what's this board's action?
I think our action is going to be to add another method for stamping, like we've got an electronic method, and maybe augment that or do something that we.
So at whatever level of detail.
I think that has to get pushed through probably by TDOT as far as a rule change. I don't know whether, does that go into the legislature
It's not
to be
It's not
changed?
a stat.
A review process in place before it would make it.
Yeah, and that's why I told her it may take a little bit. I couldn't remember if it's rule or law. I couldn't remember which one it was in, but the stamping, it's a rule, isn't
Of
it?
it in our rules
Okay,
right
okay.
now.
So anyway, I told them it would take more than a day to go get that changed.
Our rulemaking process can take up to 9 months.
I'll just say this, I hope that maybe we can implement this using the least amount of verbiage possible, because in our rules, because I know some states, and I think Florida's among them, I know North Carolina is, because they did a presentation on their sealing requirements at the NCAAS meeting a couple years ago, and their rules are just, the seals rule is just extremely complex, very lengthy, extremely detailed, and which is not necessarily a bad thing, but
Want to make it usable,
it's just hard for people to follow, and
as little as possible, but
yeah.
Great thing about learning from others.
one other comment. I think I saw the notes of the last meeting that there was some mention of clarifying the difference between electronic and digital signatures. And I think that would be a good idea, because that's a question that I get a lot, and maybe everybody does. But I don't think our rules have that right now. We just mention electronic or digital. But I think we need to define that, because I never can remember which is which. So.
Yeah, and again, I think this obviously falls under the digital sealing methods. I mean, so it may just have to then we can clarify at that time.
So we'll keep it on.
Decoupling of the experience and the examination requirements, anything new on that? Did we have a?
I don't have anything new. I just left it on the
Leave it on there.
agenda, just so.
Yeah, just so we can remember that it's
Forget about it.
that it's an issue.
Unless Chris has any news or. No.
At this point, I was going to say, let's, roll call that Ms. Ware is here, so thank you, hello. And I didn't stop and say who was here and thank the visitors and staff. Thank y'all. Waltney from ASCE, so thank you. Kathy, for your benefit, we went ahead and did unfinished business so that the stuff of importance, you would be here, so thank you. Go back to applications and audits for reviews, discussion, and signature. We have 14 of these, so we're going to go pretty quickly. The idea being that if there is a review that's done, that person will lead, or the one who asks for discussion will lead and introduce this. We'll have as much discussion as we need, but if let's don't just discuss for the benefits of discussing. Let's discuss based on a. Start with Adrian Allen Bennett, Mr. Campbell. Alphabetically, and that can be confusing.
Well, I got this one instead of the other one, so
You got which one?
I had the one I printed off.
Oh, this is the full one that Wanda keeps me updated. Thank you.
All right,
Wanda.
so Mr. Bennett was asked to submit more detailed information. He does some bridge design, load modeling for TDOT. He finally did submit some additional information after we told him that we couldn't approve it. From the way I looked at it, his experience looked good. I mean, once he kind of came up there and said what he did, he uses modeling, like I said, to check load limits for oversized loads going over different bridges as they go down routes. He's done some structural design of different types with bridges and different things for TDOT. And I think it's kind of, and Mr. Lim said to discuss the concerns with professional attitude. And I agree. I mean, he was almost kind of like, well, here's my experience, tough, and was at the very beginning. But I didn't see anything in the approval that led us, I mean, he's not a registrant yet, so I didn't see anything that although that let us kind of say no because you've got a crappy attitude, but I may be missed something. But I approved him based on experience, so that's.
And attitude's not the primary thing we're here to judge.
No.
I know that professionalism and attention to the rules and laws are, but attitude.
My recommendation was to approve.
I cannot open the document on my phone that, I did review it, that Mr. Lim, do you have those comments?
I didn't bring them with
You did not, okay. It's not opening on my
Well,
phone,
yes,
which
I did.
means that it's probably,
me.
I got him right here somewhere. Let me see. I'll tell you what he said. He
oh,
said,
it's because it's a picture and I can't open pictures on my phone. Thank you. I got it. On Mr. Bennett, Mr. Lim said, well, I understand Mr. Bennett's position. As a board member, I cannot review the application without more details. The committee needs to discuss Mr. Bennett's professional attitude. It appears that his civil experience needs to be reviewed by our board member. Anyway, that's been done because Mr. Campbell has reviewed it. So I think we're good on that piece of Mr. Lim's. So what's your recommendation?
I mean, my recommendation based on the experience was to approve, because I really didn't see anything in our laws and rules that said we could deny based on just a poor attitude, you know? I mean, and he does. I mean, he's obviously treated the staff in a unprofessional way. But once he got his feet held to the fire, he did turn over the documentation. So, I mean, that was, you know, I don't know.
So we're,
Description of his work initially was terrible.
Yeah, I did this, and you should know what, I mean, basically, you should know what that is, you know, and like, well, yeah,
but that's been rectified, we think?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
pretty good description.
So by consensus, are we okay with that?
I'm good.
Want us to vote on every one, or can we vote at the, do you want to vote independently?
Better to vote on each one.
Yeah,
I think.
probably. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve Mr. Bennett's application.
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Got it? Second is Aruka Ajani Embry. Application has been reviewed by all 3 board members, and none have approved. Mr. Lim would like to discuss. On this one, Mr. Lim says, I am not able to establish Mr. Embry's progressive design experience in his write-up. The committee members still should discuss. So if those who voted, well, none have approved. Mr. Lim says that he was not able to discern, so he really kind of absented himself from the review. So I'm not sure if there's really an issue here, but how about if Ms. Ware or Ms. Campbell, if y'all feel like you disapproved, if there's a reason to look at this again in the light of approval, then I think that would be something that y'all would need to I think it's pretty straightforward. Sure, that's okay. It's
I thought
Embry.
I had them all in here, and this one was not.
This technology, I'll tell you. I know, it's tough. It's tough. On the library, and number 2. Look, hit titles. Here. John showed me a
Titles are
trick.
in order.
John showed me a trick. John showed us.
I learned it from Wanda Garner. so-
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Um,
75 and
So it has been disapproved by all. Is there any, either one of you want to open it up?
sure, yeah.
I'm sorry, the application has been reviewed by all 3 board members and none have approved.
Campbell disapproved.
Mr. Campbell disapproved.
And I asked for discussion.
Oh,
I
you
was-
asked for discussion as well,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
because I wanted to make sure that I understood
Okay.
what he was stating as his
That's-
research. And so on the basis of what I had seen, I said, this is not engineering experience. He worked at a landfill from '05 to '07, and for all practical purposes, he did what I would refer to as landfill oversight, operational oversight or supervision. So he does a lot of things relative to how much ground cover, and this pump broke down and I had to get it fixed, and there's not any engineering from what I can see. And that's '05 to '07, and then after that, from '07 to current, he basically says, if you want to follow along, it's page 17 of his package. He starts talking about Echo C2S is the name of a company that I think he owns. That's part of the problem. It's kind of hard to see what it is that he says he does, and he's self-employed, and there doesn't seem to be an engineer in his supervision chain. He writes code. He talks to clients. He created an edible forest garden. He used various teaching strategies to help students. He did some research, and then for a couple seemed to be one of the few things. He worked for Ricky Swift at Metro Water, and so that was supervision that was good.
How long was that?
That was 3 months, I believe.
Okay.
608, 4 months. Then he went to teaching, and he was a teacher, and obviously his person was not maybe a year and a half while he was doing some grad school work. Back to teaching, and as he was a technician, he created maps and art at USGS, and he took mulch samples from a bioreactor. There was nothing in here other than working for Ricky Swift that I could see, and as well as part-time work when he was in grad school working under Louis, that actually qualified him as performing engineering work. And so my question was, if there was anybody else who saw something in there that I didn't see, I would be willing to listen to that. But my assessment was I didn't see engineering. I saw a lot of science, lots and lots and lots of science, but not anything that was engineering. My assessment was, again, unless somebody saw something I didn't understand to be engineering, I did not find him to be qualified.
Your recommendation is approved. See anything that would be contrary?
He was only there 4 months, so.
Anybody?
I'd like to make a recommendation that we disapprove his application.
You have a recommendation on
Has to reapply. He's going to need several years. It's not, I would not approve him for next spring.
Well, I mean, based on your recount, you really
Didn't count
only
it.
had about 4 months.
I didn't count
was-
it up. He's been at TDOT for 6 months, excuse me.
So
What
maybe-
month are we in? He's been there 9 months, and he had
So-
4 months with Ricky, so 13 months. And then he had a grad, he worked for grad, but he didn't tell if that was full-time or part-time, so I couldn't tell.
So several years.
I think he's at least 2 years off. I mean, because some of the experience may be okay when he's doing some of the programming and it's almost like an ag engineering thing, but it doesn't look, I don't know. I mean.
It's just hard to tell. I mean, he's
I
got,
couldn't tell if that was just farm. I mean, it's really.
it looks
is
like
difficult.
science.
Yeah,
It looks like
really is
science, it just
difficult.
doesn't look like engineering.
So,
And maybe the counseling would be that, that the engineering experience be really highlighted on the next application so that we can get a better sense of.
Did we vote? I don't think we voted.
We have not. We have a motion from Ms. Ware. Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Gerald is Campbell.
Yeah, so Fitzgerald, I think I came back and approved him on the second go-around, if I'm not mistaken, Wanda, second or third go-around. These are difficult cases for me. This is a person that is in the Navy, went to nuclear reactor school, has done a lot of really important stuff. Doesn't have PE experience except maybe one, I think, that was a PE. But he's obviously got a lot of very technical people that are overseeing his work. He's been through a pretty, what I would hope would be a pretty strenuous academic and caseload type thing. And it's obviously got a lot of engineering because it's, optimizing things that are going on with nuclear reactors, the safety protocols, and what he's doing. So really the primary objection is he's not got direct PE experience. And again, I always struggle with these because when you look at somebody from one of the service areas, like a West Point person or something, I mean, that's, some of those places are where the engineers, a lot of our concepts for engineering actually began. And I just think this guy's probably deserving of being licensed because I just think it's kind of one of those out of the norm where it's going to be very difficult, and he's got, reviews by people that are obviously technical and used to reviewing technical people and documents. So my recommendation will be approved.
Okay.
As long as we have that flexibility, I'm good.
I think we do.
I think we do too.
I'm sorry, what flexibility? The,
To approve.
oh, yes, I see what you're saying. Thank you, thank you,
The
yes.
oversight by
yes,
PE.
Yeah. Is there any discussion around the motion to approve? Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Ms. Ware, if you'll introduce Mr. Freer. Want me to read the intro that,
Yeah,
would that be helpful? I can do that.
I have no idea what I
That's
disapproved
okay.
on the basis
I
of,
know,
I'm sorry.
I know, let me do that. Application was approved by Lim, disapproved by Ware and Campbell, disapproved by Ware, and Campbell would like to discuss. Both believe he needs one more year of progressive experience. So I guess what we need to know is that still your is that a recommendation that you could live with?
Sorry, but I'm drawing a blank on this. I'm having to refresh my memory. I don't really know what I looked at.
The train.
Okay, take a moment. During the downtime, may I ask a dumb question? The taping, is that taping or live streaming? Okay, I just would remind us all that that's going on.
While we're talking about that, if everyone could speak into the mic too. When I usually go back and review the meetings, and then some people talk and the light's not on, you can't hear anything.
Can't hear
So
anything. Thank you for
somebody
that
does watch
reminder.
them. It's usually me.
Wanda, sometimes when I fill these forms out, I put comments out to the side as to why I disapprove them. Do you have my comments on there that would help me? Because I can't seem to recall why.
Needs more experience when
Going through here talking about all this TDOT projects he's worked on, he didn't say whether he's actually the one doing the design work or whether he's managing a consultant.
And just to give you some background, he is what they call their utility coordination engineer, I believe is the right term. And I think historically that job has not been, it's basically been, do you have certain documents? Oh yeah, that looks like that's pretty close to right. Are you, what's your budget for replacement of water line, sewer line, whatever that is? Do you have your plans in on time and all that? Some of the reorganization stuff, that's gotten a little bit more, a little bit less of a clerical part, but in looking at his application, and I've had this discussion on another individual with somebody else, there's still a clerical reviewing part of that it's hard to really see. So if you see two things that are in the same space on a drawing, and you raise your hand and say, hey, these two things are in the same place, is that engineering? I mean, to me, it's not really. Now, if you go, hey, these two things are in the same space, I've reviewed the cross-sections and looked, it looks like if you were deeper, I mean, you go through some analysis process after just raising your hand, and honestly, I couldn't see in this applicant more than doing some of that. I didn't see somebody taking an active role in taking data and solving an issue. So that was just me. I mean, in going through it, others may have different things.
There are a couple of places in here where he says help to design the utility relocation. So it's, it's hard to know exactly help design what that means, but it could mean design.
Hey, y'all see the
So we've had an initial review recommendation of 1 more year of progressive experience. Is that still consistent?
Yeah, I think I got his updated, and it looked like there were a few more of those, Ricky, like you stated correctly, that I calculated this, or I analyzed this, or I did some other of those. So, but it looked like we needed at least another year of more of that kind of experience and less of what I would call the clerical raising my hand experience.
Well, he mentions calculations, but he's talking about roadside clear zone.
Yeah.
And he says, I performed calculations to confirm that all new pole locations do not pose any threat to motorists. So I'd like to know what calculation he performed.
Yeah,
because there isn't any.
Yeah, unless you've got some sort of model and you're doing a 3D look at it from where people pull out, that's going to be tough. I know.
I do that word live stream.
Yeah, I know. So, no, I agree. I mean, I saw it. There is some engineering and taking a set of plans and going through and checking things and saying, hey, we need to move it left or right, or we've got some area over here. I've looked at the plans, and it looks like if you can tighten this slope up or make this or do those kind of things, those are certainly engineering things that we do, but I just didn't see enough of that, for the experience that we were at.
I think when I looked at his experience, to me, it was kind of 50-50. If you had to really judge him on what constitutes engineering per se, progressive engineering versus what I would refer to as administrative, he says he paid invoices and he met with people and he went out and he did this and he did that. And I gave him, in my mind, half credit, about 50%, and then that added up to a deficit, and he needed more experience. So I would say a year is about right.
So can somebody make a motion? Seems like we're ready.
You want to? I'll make a motion that we approve him to set for the October 2018, that's about a year, right? October 2018, is that correct? 2018 exam, based on the current path that he's on.
Is there a second?
Robert,
Resubmit
Yeah.
the details of that experience, wouldn't he?
would you be willing to accept him for the spring? He submitted in June. You're making him wait almost another a year and a half till.
Have to, in the motion, put in when we think the applicant should reapply, or couldn't we just say, no, you're not ready, and as we've done before, I think, give guidance that we think about another year would be approved? That way, what if this
We've
person
done it in the
doesn't?
past where we actually went ahead and approved him
Yeah.
for the next.
What if this person doesn't continue working for TDOT or something?
They go down.
What if their position changes or whatever?
So I'll rescind the motion since there wasn't a second. Sorry about that, John. So let me make the motion this way. The applicant send us an updated experience prior to the April, which we're getting close to prior to the April now. I mean, it's a couple months, isn't it? So that's what I'm saying. I don't know that he's,
send it like in January.
But we regularly give them, assume that they will have experience for 2 more months to push them over the edge or something like that. We do that all the time. Well, I think what you're saying is he's going to be disproved, and so he needs to resubmit. But if he resubmits for the spring, that he would be considered.
That's our
Say that.
suggestion.
That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, well, you just said it, why don't you
Yeah,
say it?
Ms. Ware is making the motion.
Okay, I will make a motion on Robert's behalf that we disapprove of Mr. Freer's application and encourage him to resubmit to sit for the spring 2018 exam.
Second.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Mr. Bursai is going to tell us about Mr. Habib.
And before we get started on this application, disciplinary counsel has advised that we might want to wait to discuss this. Going to be on the complaint report tomorrow.
Okay, you're off the hook, Mr. Bursai. All
All
right.
that homework.
I know. So you'll be ready for the complaint. Okay, good.
Okay.
The next one is Haygood, and I'll introduce it. Mr. Haygood self-reported that he practiced on an expired license. Campbell approved pending passage of laws and rules exam. Lim would like to discuss. And the comments from Mr. Lim, right here, hold on. Let's see. Mr. Lim was the one who suggested we open the complaint. And also required him pass the law and rule exam. And I'm assuming that both of y'all are recommending approval pending successfully passing the law and rule exam. Okay. So in looking at this, just real briefly, he had an expired license and was practicing at the time. So there was actually a project that he removed himself from at the time.
There is an open complaint on this one as well, so.
Is that, okay.
So that'll be discussed and.
So we're not gonna, oh, okay.
Practice on an expired license, but y'all can review it independently of that. And
Is there any point of reviewing it independently? I mean, we can't approve,
no, you could still potentially approve it pending, without resolving the complaint at this point. There was at one time when individuals reapplied and reported practice on an expired
Yeah.
license, we would hold their applications pending resolution of the complaint. And we changed that practice, I think, a couple of years ago, because it was, the view was that we did not need to tie the approval of their application to the resolution of the complaint. So we changed that procedure where now you still review them even before the complaint's been presented to the board. You can still.
we should go ahead and.
Yeah, you could still approve if the application.
Okay, so really, and the point of
good.
this is not to say whether there should be a complaint or not, because that's already been opened. Okay, okay. So really, the fact that there's a complaint has nothing to do with this discussion. Okay, okay. So the recommendation from both Mr. Lim and it seems from Mr. Campbell was approval pending passage of laws and rules exam. Is that appropriate or still
Yeah, I mean,
appropriate? Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve the applicant pending the passage of the laws and rules exam.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. Thanks for your help in navigating through these. Appreciate it. Michael Ray Johnson, introduced by Mr. Campbell. That's one. Application was approved by Lim. Campbell would like to discuss experience. Halfway through. Doing pretty well.
Go ahead and I'll talk while you're going. He also does these loading models for certain bridges, and has worked on that. He looks like, I mean, he's a GTA from June 2013 to 2014, and there is some experience in that. But obviously it's a year, but it seems like his path is that he's getting his experience from is in structural engineering, and I don't really see. It looks like all of these are evaluating bridge inspection reports. It looks like he's doing this load evaluation over these overload permits. He's doing inspection work, looking at the county bridge reports that come through. His task is to check the load rating. Let's see, that's load rating. He's attended some courses. He's been enrolled at TDOT's master's program. I just don't see a real in-depth structural background, or somebody that's claiming structures is their primary method to get licensed or to be able, compared to other structural engineers that we see applications from. And I'm worried that once he gets licensed, and this is kind of his background is in structures, that he may feel empowered to go do that. I would prefer to see more structural design, which in the department he's in should be no problem.
So.
My recommendation would be, to come back to us in a year with some updated experience, showing more design. These these overload models are certainly very interesting and require you to look at a lot of different factors and understand that. But there's nothing like designing a structure instead of evaluating, and it just seems like a lot of it is in evaluating. And there's something about that iterative process, it seems to me, that really does help you understand a little bit better. I don't see that from this applicant.
So I heard a motion in there, I think.
Yes, you did.
A motion to.
Come back to us with experience in another year and let us reevaluate.
Is there a second? Discussion. Any further discussion?
Robert, you think he will have there is an opportunity for him to do bridge design in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's 730-something bridges on the Improve Act. I think everybody that's got a abacus is going to be able to do some sort of bridge
Pull people out of
design.
retirement,
That's
right?
right. I mean, there will be an opportunity to at least design one structure in the next year or so. I would hope.
Why we're seeing so many TDOT applicants.
Well, you sometimes, and honestly, this is a thing, and I don't want to mean to, but you get comfortable doing certain things, and that's where you are, and you're just not very aggressive in seeking out other things. And especially in an organization as large as TDOT, that's easy to do, is become the expert or the person that knows how to punch the right buttons. And you've got to kind of go seek out, I think, those opportunities to broaden your skill set a little bit. And he's certainly got the opportunity.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed?
So, she's worked for contractors, doing shop drawing review, built and managed the project mock-up, so they're scheduling, invoicing, on-site project manager of a 4-story wood frame structure, analyzed constructability of design details, supervised entry-level engineers, worked directly with structural and MEP engineering teams and trade contractors. There is she moved up into bid package preparation analysis, buyout of subcontracts, guided clients on design selections based on constructability analysis, schedule impact, value engineering studies. And then I got an updated one from her that says, does use some more engineering words. She starts talking about prefabricated wood panels, building skins, fiber cement siding, reviewed all material submittals and structures and systems, completed detailed reviews of prefabricated wall panel, created detailed layout plans, witnessed testing of ductwork airtightness, witnessed and signed off on concrete slump tests on site, analyzed failures of concrete test results, walked the project with structural engineer of record, inspected the stormwater, designed the project schedule. I see a project manager. I don't see somebody, I see somebody responsible for budgets, again, to make sure all the check marks got checked. When you witness the slump test, I don't know that that's what I would classify as engineering. When you witness somebody doing the ventilation, let's see here, what does it say? Witness testing of ductwork airtightness and piping pressure. I mean, you wouldn't consider that commissioning, would you, Ricky? You're just making sure the gauge doesn't drop down below.
Yeah, that's not necessarily commissioning.
And there are certainly some things in our progressive engineering experience that talk about schedule, analysis of work, they talk about budgets, but they're also talking about it in terms of kind of the overall package, not specifically. So you can't get a license for being a great scheduler. And I just didn't, I saw a lot of that part of it, but not in a lot of the other analysis stuff. So for that reason, I recommended that we do not.
What would you be looking for with the kind of work that she?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know that that's, I don't know that I can answer that question because certainly if I were out there every day with her, there would probably be some opportunities to show some things. But I mean, I think that's up to her to take some of those and sit down and look at, because again, I mean, the others may see it. I just,
That's what she'd be looking for in feedback. Yeah, Kathy.
All right, so here's what I think's going on, Robert. I think she's doing what construction engineers do, but she's not saying it in using the words and describing it in ways that make us feel comfortable that she understands the realm of engineering. But in the construction engineering world, and I say that because of the letter she wrote back, page 15 of the application, is a letter that she wrote to explain. It's dated July 14th. And she references some people I know. I mean, like, I happen to know Joe Albanese, believe it or not, and I certainly know Joe Schrank. And she's working with PEs, but she doesn't understand that she needs to be more explicit in describing the engineering aspect. She's more concerned with the construction aspect of her job. I think she's got a semantics problem as opposed to a qualified to sit for the exam problem. So I would be inclined to at least give her a chance to resubmit her experience profile or something, or come in and explain a little bit more about what she's doing, or get some other references. But on the face of it, I think she's a construction engineer. I think she's focused on construction, and the things that constructors are more concerned with, which is buildings and deadlines and materials and schedules and things like that, than, quote, design. But just because she's not a pure design engineer doesn't mean she's not ready to sit for the exam. And if she sits for the exam and she doesn't pass, then she doesn't deserve it. But I think she's working with PEs. There's no doubt. And like I said, I know a couple of these people. And Skanska is a reputable firm too, and they have a lot of PEs. And she kind of makes reference to that. I should have mentioned these people previously. So I'm kind of coming to her defense, but I kind of see where she's coming from too.
Mostly based on the quality of her application and not necessarily the description.
Is there any intermediary step that she can take beyond what she's already done? Is there anything we can allow? Take one more step toward, yeah.
Always, you haven't used this ability in quite a while, but you can interview her, certainly. Occasionally, we do schedule interviews. We haven't done that in some time, but it's always a good option.
That occur.
Probably, where's she located at? She's in Nashville, right?
That would or would not.
Well, she's an exam applicant, so yeah, it wouldn't be in time for her to sit for the
October exam, but still. And if we asked for more detailed or revised description, that couldn't be processed because we'd have to redo it again. We'd have to relook at it in October. If not approved today, it's not going to be for October anyway. So.
Yeah.
Because the exam deadline is
Yeah.
August 31st.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I'd point out, like on that same letter, she says she doesn't quite understand how seriously we take the issue of working under the direction of a PE. And so she says, I did work under the supervision of Brian Schrems, PE, while at Skanska. I erroneously marked him as co-worker, but again, that's because in the construction world in which they work, a lot of times these construction people don't have necessarily a PE as their boss. They have a project principal, and that person is responsible for the team, and they're much more collaborative than they are line management oriented the way we are. And so they may have 2 or 3 PEs on the team, depending on the size of the project. This one's huge. It's 350,000 square feet. So they might have a couple of PEs that they go to on an ad hoc basis. And she's doing a lot of coordination stuff. But I think it's more or less an issue of she needs to use the right language and make us feel more comfortable that she's actually had PE input, oversight, direction, and course corrections when needed. And it's much more about the flow of construction than it is about sitting down, drafting, sketching, et cetera, and handing to a PE who then gives you back red lines. It's just different. It's a different world. But that's my thought.
So it seems like where we are, if Mr. Campbell, if you think it's not ready to be approved,
Well, I mean,
ready for approval, then.
Mr. Campbell is one vote, and.
No, I know, but we
we
look to you for a recommendation.
Well, I mean, I'm not, my recommendation is I've already written it down, and
Yeah.
I don't think that,
Yeah.
that has been changed. I mean, I think
Okay.
it may very well be a semantics issue. I do see some things in there, but again, as reputable as these people are, you would think some of them would give her a little bit better guidance in filling out and directing her path in explaining what she's doing from an engineering perspective. Because I agree with you on that. I mean, I don't look for necessarily the straight line. I look for somebody that they go to solve the issue at hand.
For clarification, has she been, this is her first application? Right.
She updated
Yes. Was that at our request? I'm sorry. Okay, so at our request, she's already submitted additional, okay. She's It's the very end.
Page 24.
So again, we have application was approved by Lynn, but Campbell would like to discuss her experience. So
I think my recommendation would be whatever I put on that piece of paper to deny.
yours said, oh, I don't have yours.
I thought.
You said would like to
Our
discuss.
stuff says would like to discuss.
Okay, maybe
We
that's
didn't
what
see
She
where
said
you
would like to
denied.
discuss.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Well, again, that's the discussion part of it. My recommendation would be to have her in here for a formal interview and talk to see if it's a semantics problem. I mean, I do see a few things, I mean, but she talks about some shells that she did and some waterproofing things that she designed. Things in here that I see, but when you start looking at these lengthy descriptions,
Is that,
and out of 300 bullets, 5 of them say something that I would be looking for, and that's maybe an exaggeration. Then I always am.
so your motion is disapprove pending an
An interview,
at the next opportunity.
yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded, is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you. Next one is Jason Patterson. Again, Mr. Patterson earned his engineering degree in 2015 and has 1 year, 9 months of postgraduate experience. He has been employed with Cannon & Cannon since July 1990. I'd like the board to count his time before he earned his degree. Campbell would like to discuss the appeal letter from W. Harold Cannon Jr., president of Cannon & Cannon. All right, and that's with the application, I guess. Let's see.
Mr. Patterson is one of those individuals that has been working his whole career at Cannon & Cannon, came out of school with a biology, geology degree, I can't remember exactly. Went to work, surveyor, technician, then went back to school, was working a 32 or 40-hour work week, and that's attested to by Harold. And when you look at his experience during that 32 and 40-hour work week, it is extremely consistent with what we would approve for a new PE to sit for the exam. I mean, the question that we have is, it's a consistency and a precedence question. He doesn't have an official co-op, which our rules say there's a highlighted section about co-ops. It says the board may grant experience towards registration until 1 year credit for graduates and master's degree, or up to 1 year an established cooperative program which is carried out within the framework of the engineering curriculum. There was a Harold, or Mr. Cannon, I don't know if I'm supposed to refer to him, but Cannon. That was his dad, I'm sorry, so I have to call him Harold. I have to call him Harold to break that up. But anyway, Harold maintains that there was some miscommunication about what was required when they called the board and that they would have certainly had a co-op program set up for him. I'm comfortable with recommending approval with some questions or something here, and I don't know if that's the questions are right. AIC's experience is extremely consistent, and he's been doing it on what we would call a regular work week. A 32 to 40-hour work week is again attested to by his employer, who and I think most people in the room know fairly well, is being pretty straight up with stuff. So that's number one. And number two, Harold told me that they would have gotten a co-op, but again, there was some confusion on that, so that would have been, what he would have been doing would have counted as a co-op type assignment, and they are actually in the process of trying to determine from UT what will qualify for them to do that in the future, so they don't have this same issue. But we get into what our rules say, and I talked to John a little bit, and I asked, have we ever done this? Harold maintains that we did this for him when he was getting, and it's, he's a second generation person as I am, and I seem to remember we have given some credit, but I don't know. My memory wouldn't take me back that far.
Question is, what leeway do we have?
Yep, and I mean, if we have some leeway, I think this is a case where we can grant that, again, because it's not something that somebody was doing a co-op, making paper copies and running errands, and yeah, and it was full-time experience too. So, and I think it's documented by the employer, who I trust and believe and all that. And
So what leeway do we have? Can we ask that question?
that's the question I don't know.
Are you trying to substitute undergrad credit towards?
He didn't get his degree till 2015, so
Yeah, but that's what they're saying, is that credit while he was working, so he was working full-time while he was
how many
getting
years is he asking for?
probably just the one and something right now, 15, 16.
I think the problem is our rules say you've got to work, you have to get 4 years of experience after graduation. And his graduation was 2 years ago. And he's got 20 years, almost 20 years of experience doing design. So do we have leeway to say, due to the length of years and what his tasks were, that this person is ready to be a PE, take the exam and be a PE? Do we have that legal leeway?
It doesn't appear so from the statute, but if you'll give me a minute to go through it again, it really just indicates the substituting experience for the master credit, but yes. Check on that for you.
How about if we table that for a moment? I'm assuming it'll take you more than a minute, so, yeah. Randolph Pearsall, applicant was disciplined by the Ohio and North Carolina boards. Campbell approved, but stated that committee could discuss. Lynn would like to discuss Mr. Pearsall's design competence. Let me see if there's a note on this one. Here's the applicant had issues with design competence. I'm not sure where it appeared that. That's a committee, okay. That's all that he wrote. So, I hate. You're having to remember all of these, Robert.
So it's, he was disciplined from Ohio, and the words in the order were, responded to fixing a seal and signature to structural engineering plans for the construction of the Kent State University, something performing arts center, that was found to be structurally deficient and could have devastating results. They did a 2-year suspension of a license, I believe, probation. He paid $3,000. He had to do a quality assurance plan and some other stuff. So my deal was, I'm okay with giving him, I mean, his probation period is over, he served his time, paid his penalty, done those kind of things. My question was more, for these kind of applicants, do we have some sort of babysitting period, or do we have some sort of quality control, or do we have something that extra that we require? But that being said, he's paid his dues, and so I'm not sure that we would treat him any different than somebody else. That's
he-
just,
he's been reinstated in full in Ohio and North Carolina. I mean, he's done all of that. It's all over. And
I'm 99% sure if I remember the application that he has been.
so he is a licensed engineer in Ohio and North Carolina now. Correct. Okay. Mr. Campbell, what would be your recommendation?
My recommendation would be to approve him, and again, his experience is really good. His, I mean, he seems to meet the, on an engineer, it's just, how do you feel on somebody that's been disciplined, but that has come out of that discipline? And I think this is certainly a case where he served his time. I mean, it appears to me.
A motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, approved. Are you ready for us to go back to Mr. Patterson?
That's fine. I don't believe we have any leeway according to the statute, according to our board rules under 0120-01-.10. The last sentence, it says, unless otherwise noted above, an applicant's engineering experience must be obtained after graduation with a qualifying degree and completed by the date of the examination. And I didn't see anything in the previous section above that would give authority.
In this case, then, I would think we don't need to take a vote because.
Well, but I mean, I'll ask the question, have we done it in the past?
We don't have the
I
leeway.
think it has occurred in the past, but like you, my memory's not clear enough where I can lay hands on the file.
Well, I mean,
This was done, but if memory serves correctly, I think it has been done not in some time.
That's what I want to know, but then why, if we've done it in the past, then we've been in violation of our rule in the past, because our rule's not really changed in a long time in that part of it. So, I mean, I don't know why this is a pretty qualified applicant.
I don't think we can.
Well, I mean,
Board, we can't. Can
but we have in the past.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean we can do it again, now that we've got new information.
I think this is old information. I just think that,
No, I mean, the information from legal is new.
well, I would like to have that rehashed, please, and table this applicant or something, because if we've done it in the past, there was some justification from other boards to do it in the past, and I think treating this guy differently is just not the way to do it if we've done it in the past. And I think according to Mr. Cannon, that's the way he was approved as well, and he would have been under this same set of restrictions.
I can look at the rule history, which might take a little bit longer, but I'm happy to review that and report back to you.
On this one, we'll defer to next meeting, pending. Skinner, Ms. Ware?
All right, so Ms. Skinner basically had a pretty good application, but she wasn't able to, in her initial application, to provide prior experience PE references. She only had current, and there was just a hole. And so Wanda reached out to her. If you look on page 18 of her, responds back to Wanda and says, that was a long time ago. The two companies that I worked with, one's been sold, and I lost contact with everybody else. And that was really only 3 years of my 17-year career, and everything else was after that was at TDEC at UST Division. So in light of that, I would recommend that we go ahead and approve her, given the fact that she's given a reasonable excuse for why she doesn't have prior supervisory experience.
So motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, approved. Ms. Ware, Dennis Stewart, do you want me to read this?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. Application was disapproved by Lim because his degree, Mr. Stewart's degree is building construction. Ware would like to discuss. He has submitted a letter and documentation from his attorney that his degree be accepted, and I think this is the bound, is that correct? Yes, so this is the bound document from Pannoni, the attorney at Pannoni, and it, in looking at it briefly, it basically says that the review that Tennessee's he did is in conflict with the reviews that were done in other states that approved Mr. Stewart. Have anything?
My only question was, what's the, again, going back to precedent, if we have in the previous given our consultant, whose name escapes me, I can't remember what his name is. Dr. Smith. I can't remember that. That's my maiden name. Why, if we gave it to him and we always rely on him and he says it's not equivalent, then is there a precedent for overriding his judgment to us, for which we pay him, if I understand, for him to go through and do this, correct? And so if he says it's not equivalent, not a bit equivalent, then do we even have the ability to override that? And B, have we ever done it before?
You definitely have the ability to. He's just a consultant. He's making a recommendation, but the board makes the final determination.
Have we in the past?
No, generally you go with whatever Dr. Smith recommends. That's typically been the case.
That's true, but we've also come at it from some different ways of of what he's recommended.
Yeah, normally that you would follow Dr. Smith's recommendation, but that hasn't always been the case.
I was going to say
I
seem to remember a couple of times taking, just to. So in the letter from the attorney, 7 of the states in which Mr. Stewart is registered required an independent curriculum evaluation. Each of the states found that Mr. Stewart's curriculum was substantially equivalent to the table on the second page that compares those.
We'll say this, if there was ever anybody that we were going to waive this for, the gentleman worked for 13 years at Ross Bryan under Henry Clark himself. So, that's why I'm asking if there is a precedent by which we have done this.
Mr. Campbell's previous on some of these applicants. This is one that seems.
Yeah, it seems like a slam
so
dunk
straightforward to me.
If you were going to ask me, but I don't know if it's possible. So that's the only question I have.
And I think that the analysis by Mr. Peter Coote, the lawyer, is worthy of our attention. Highly recommend we reevaluate this one. Is there a way to send this back to Dr. Smith and have him look at this letter? Is that appropriate? Is that an appropriate action? I'm not sure that I would know how to counter this argument, but I would think Mr. Smith would. And if it made sense to him, then perhaps that would be important information for the board, for the committee.
What is the rule that we have used in the past, equivalence to make up for higher mathematics and basic science deficiencies? I know there's just several different ways that person can make that up. John, can you refresh our memory on that?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, the rules do allow an evaluation of the degree to determine if it's equivalent, and opportunity has been given to applicants to remedy those deficiencies, usually by taking additional courses. We've only allowed typically other activities to count, like passing tests for citizenship, et cetera, if it's a humanities, social sciences, general ed deficiency, which I don't think is the case here. So, I mean, we have allowed those opportunities, but generally it's been only in cases where they have a degree in engineering, bachelor's degree in engineering. And in this case, it's a little different because his BS from Auburn is in building construction, which is housed within Auburn's College of Architecture and Design, not within their College of Engineering. It's never been located within the College of Engineering on that campus. But I think in the materials he provided, the former dean, I believe it is, of that college says that at the time he attended school there, that degree was essentially an engineering curriculum, even though it was not housed within the College of Engineering. So I think that's the real crux of the matter, whether you should deny him just simply on the basis that he does not have the bachelor's degree in engineering, or potentially approve it because his education is equivalent to an engineering curriculum.
And how does this compare to the people who just got the 2-year sunset law passed in the last legislature? I can't remember what that was on the basis, the rule that was just passed.
For the master's degree with,
Okay,
20
so
years experience.
20 years experience and a master's?
Right.
Does this guy have a master's?
No, he does not. Just the bachelor's degree.
That's the equivalent of a master's.
One way to look at it is we have Dr. Smith's evaluation that says it's not ABET equivalent. And
Significantly short.
short, and we have double-digit number of states that did a similar review and says that it is. So I would think the board has, the committee has the option of making a determination. And we could say this has been reviewed, his degree has been reviewed 25 times and 24 reviewers have found it to be equivalent, or look at it.
I think it's 7, but yeah, I think
Whatever.
one is well
I
taken.
thought it was at least 11, but look at it as a whole, and then couple that with his experience. It would, I'm not sure denying comedy is the right thing to do here.
And one difficulty that we've had is there's some contradictory language in our law. For engineers in section 622401, it says they have to be a graduate of an engineering curriculum of 4 years or more approved by the board as being of satisfactory standing. So that's for the engineers. Just says engineering curriculum of 4 years or more, which might lead you to think, well, maybe we could just regard this as an engineering curriculum even though it's not designated as a degree in engineering. Might be acceptable on that basis. But under engineer intern, the next statute, 622402, it specifically says they have to have a baccalaureate degree in engineering approved by the board. So there's a difference in wording there. I don't know why that difference exists, if there's a reason behind it.
What's that second definition in reference to the engineer intern?
Engineer interns, which is usually,
But this guy
that's
doesn't
the
want to
first
be an
step.
engineer intern.
No, right, that statute wouldn't apply in his
That
case.
statute wouldn't apply to him,
But
but
it's
the first one
interesting that
would.
there's that difference in wording there. I don't
Somebody,
know why that happened, but I think clearly in this case, if the statute for engineers specifically said baccalaureate degree in engineering, it would be more difficult, I think, to justify an approval in this case, but since it says engineering curriculum, yeah, I think that does give you some leeway there. Is that the way you were looking at it?
I would agree.
So our legal opinion is that it does provide for leeway to grant that
Educate, yes.
But traditionally, the board has interpreted the engineering statute as meaning you've got to have a BS degree in engineering, a curriculum of 4 years or more, but that's not specifically what it says.
So, I'm sorry, what did, we just heard that? Okay, okay, I wasn't clear. Does anybody ready to make a motion on approval or disapproval? What's yours, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the applicant for COMITE registration as an engineer under the auspices of the statute that refers to an engineering curriculum.
A second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
So I vote aye. So it's 3. It passes.
Voted no again? Okay. Stephen King, Robert.
All right. I'm going to butcher this name, Suzuka. Mr. Campbell? And if the application was not approved by either Campbell or Ware, Campbell requested clarification regarding his experience, but would still like to discuss. Do you still want to discuss?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find where I, my notes. Make sure that I did, yeah, I've got it, I'm trying to remember, I think this was the one that I was probably okay with, I just wanted to know,
This says you was not approved by either
right, right,
Campbell
there
or
was
Ware.
another one that I was thinking about
Yeah.
here. So, this person is works for a vendor, I think is probably the right thing to say. And they're basically in engineering support, so if a customer comes in, wants to do certain things, they are able to, he specifies equipment for them to meet their particular needs. He mentions in his additional letter, let me pull it back up again. Potential clients contact us with application needs. While they know what they want to accomplish, they may not necessarily know how to attain the goal. Some examples: sensing and measurement applications, designing systems to read and process barcode, verifying, inspecting parts using vision camera systems, robotic applications, and those kind of things. He says he gathers the necessary technical data, and then, assuming they can take care of that, they come up with the solution that best fits the technical data. So my concern is, I don't know how much of that he really does on a, I don't know, I certainly can see this as engineering, and that's not really my question. I mean, there are a lot of people that we deal with that are vendors that, you know, we rely on for some very technical things, helping us to put components together that, you know, are matched correctly, those kind of things. But I'm just not sure exactly how much of that he does on an ongoing basis, and does he have enough project experience to justify the 4 years of experience. And so that was my primary concern with the applicant. He probably, you know, if he'd been doing this 10 years, that's probably something that we could say, yeah, that's a good thing. But I think how much of that time is spent doing that, how much of that time is spent, you know, going and pulling parts off the shelf or something. And I'm just lost. So, My recommendation,
Explanation is on the last page, if y'all want to see that.
my recommendation, John, is that I think I would prefer that we have him here and discuss, because I mean, I don't know what level of detail he goes into. And, you know, some of the people that do this kind of work, it's really, they take a parts catalog and they have a matrix that somebody else has established, and they say that part A goes with parts B, C, D, and if you want it to go really fast, you use this other thing. I mean, that's, you know, and I just want to make sure that we're not dealing with something like that.
The letter kind of addresses that, though.
Well, he says they call him and talk to him, but it doesn't.
Well, I mean, he talks about engineering a solution.
How much of that has he done versus picking stuff off the pick list? Yeah.
I wasn't really comfortable with the fact that he had 3 of his 5 references were basically friends. At a minimum, I would love to see some more people that represent to what he does for a living to vouch for him, as opposed to our wives know each other. I mean, that was literally one of the explanations.
I'd forgotten about that
Yeah.
part, but it was a little weak on the.
Pretty weak on the reference side, combined with the fact, yes, to me, it looks an awful lot like what the old sales engineer description. So that was why I disapproved it.
Would you then disapprove, or do you disapprove pending an interview?
I mean, I think my recommendation would be to just do an interview. I mean, not approve or disapprove, but to have him come and talk to us a little bit, and let's see what he does. I think that's, right now, I, again, don't have any real sense for how much of that he does. I mean, are these projects that typically last several months? Does he, how involved is he in the product selection? I mean, is it, again, taking a part A and marrying it with a part B because that's what the catalog says, and then adding a conveyor belt to it? I don't know. I just want to see kind of what let him walk through a few of these processes with us.
So the motion is pending an interview. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you, Robert. Mr. King, introducing John Thomas. The degree is deficient 4 hours in math and basic sciences. Campbell approved, but Lim would like to discuss. Let me see if there's first anything from Mr. Lim on this little thing. And then you can have the floor. I don't think I see anything, but let me see. Nope.
This is a foreign degree that was evaluated by NCAAS, and they showed 4 hours deficiency in math and basic sciences. This individual licensed in other states and has been working since 1989, I think.
Comedy application. Do you have a recommendation?
I want to hear what Robert had to say, but it seems to me that we could approve that, but
Understand that, you know, this educational hurdle, this qualifying hurdle, I think is somewhat difficult to apply to somebody that's been practicing for several years. I mean, the proof's at that point, the proof's in the pudding. When you're looking at especially this close, surely in the number of years and I think he's like 12, is that right? It's been several years, hasn't he been practicing? 27. Oh, so 27, and that's even more. Has been practicing that any kind of thing that he may be deficient on that a class in school would bring out has had to come to light by now. Again, I think that's different than somebody that we have coming out of college where you have a 4-year degree and you don't know what they really can do. I mean, they've got 4 years' experience. That's different than the amount of experience that we have now. So my typical thing, Steve, is I've always looked at somebody with a long comedy, either if it's a comedy applicant and they've got a, pretty long career that they've been doing engineering work. Some of these other things to me don't seem to matter as much, and that's just my.
A foreign degree, but it was a bachelor's of engineering. It was, I guess, different requirements. But
Practicing
he's
for a
been
long
practicing.
time.
Yeah, so
So, I mean, that's,
I would recommend approval.
Here's a motion recommending approval. Do we have a second?
second, sorry.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. That is it. We got through all of them. Congratulations. Well done. Thank you, Wanda, for sending all that out.
Can we get a quick rundown, because I think I missed somebody, and I don't want to put down that I approved them if I did not. So,
We have,
can you run down through?
Bennett approved, Embry disapproved, Fitzgerald approved, Freer disapproved, Habib was taken off the docket, Haygood approved, Johnson disapproved, King disapproved pending interview, Patterson further review by legal.
Wait, I'm sorry, mine are in different order.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, they're in a different
Because
order.
we didn't recommend comedy in exam, so.
I'm sorry,
they're-
okay.
Oh, sorry about
They're
that.
alphabetical here, but comedy on our sheet.
Haygood approved,
Haygood approved,
okay.
Johnson disapproved.
Okay.
King disapproved pending interview. Patterson further review by legal. Pearsall approved. Skinner approved. Get those correct. That's my test. Next on the agenda is NCWS annual meeting motions. Mr. Cothran, are you conducting that one?
Yes,
There you
sure.
go.
It's on page 4 on your iPads under the August 2017 meeting materials. And if you click on titles, it'll show up at the very top. So,
Way to go.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's right after the agenda. And actually, there are, believe it or not, Kathy, there are fewer motions this year than usual. So this is a lot, but often they
My
have more than
Lord.
this. Yeah, so this is not bad. But I have listed the motions on the non-consent agenda first. Usually, we'll discuss all of these, and then motions that are on the consent agenda, that we may just highlight a few of them that may be of interest, or if hopefully all of y'all have reviewed this in depth, correct? I'm sure everybody's read through.
So,
All
so
the
to
motions.
encapsulate, you're going to tell us what these are.
Yeah, I'll just, I'll
Then we,
encapsulate
as the
the-
committee, need to make a motion on how the
your position
Tennessee
on each of these.
engineering will
Right.
vote at NCWS.
Right.
So we need a motion for every one or for all?
I would say the ones that we want to highlight for discussion, probably need to vote individually on those. But the ones that we don't, that are on the consent agenda that we don't want to discuss, we could just group on those as a whole.
We vote on these one way or another, if we vote on them. And then information is presented at the meeting that might be new information, you know, how they argue the points.
Or amendments that are made from the floor.
Or amendments.
Right, yeah,
So,
that may change
Yeah.
your.
So
This is
vote.
our recommended approach.
it seems like, yeah, it ought to be something soft, not a you shall vote this way. Okay.
That's a good.
I'd say it's a
Do we have to-
position on the
does anybody
current
need to take a
Position.
break
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we do this? Take a break. Well, Mr. Campbell got up, so I wondered. Anybody need to take a break? Want to take a few minutes? No, we're good? Okay, good.
All right, so the first one, non-consent agenda, it's on page 4, is from the Special Committee on Bylaws, Motion 1. This will amend the bylaws section regarding elections and terms of office to be amended to remove language stating that a treasurer may serve consecutive terms. Currently, they can do that. And the intent is to give more individuals the opportunity to serve in a leadership role to serve in that position. So the Board of Directors does not endorse this motion. There's no explanation given in the document they sent out, so I'm not sure why they're opposing that, but.
Because the current treasurer wants to run.
Well, I mean, the other reason,
Personal, right?
I think the other reason, I think, could be that those of us who have done these kind of things, you don't really know what you're doing until your second term on some of these positions. And there's some continuity to allowing somebody serving in office a couple of times in a row. So that was my thought about why the Board of Directors didn't endorse it.
Sounds reasonable, yeah.
We're recommending to approve, to endorse it?
I would say, I mean, I understand wanting more individuals, give them more opportunity. I kind of agree with the Board of Directors not endorsing, because I think there's a lot to gain from a treasurer serving 2 terms.
I'm sorry, I read that backwards.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, I read the whole thing backwards. So the
Yeah,
board does not endorse.
Yeah, there's an
term limit.
amendment, so you can
Gotcha.
only run 1 term,
Gotcha.
period. And
Yeah, and it's
we would not
permissive right
endorse
now.
this.
It just says may serve. They're not, when they're elected to serve as treasurer, they're not automatically
and
elected.
get voted out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you could.
You're doing a
yeah.
bad job.
So is there anybody that feels the opposite, that we should endorse a term limit on? So we're good on that one?
No on that one then. Not endorsing, okay.
No means does not endorse.
Yes, right.
Double negative.
Not endorse, yes. there we
Don't
go.
ask me to explain that one.
All right, education, motion 1. Moves that position statement 35, future education requirements for engineering licensure, that is the B+30 masters or equivalent language that was removed from the model law and rules and was placed in a position statement, I think, a couple years ago. Amending that to provide a new practice-oriented pathway to obtain additional education beyond the bachelor's degree, and you have the specific language listed there. Or against?
I'm against it.
I have no idea what else.
Against it. It's just people that support B+30, they're just trying to keep something kind of hanging around so they can make a move when they think they got a better shot.
Call them out, Mr. King.
Yeah,
Call
that's
them
what
So
out.
I'm against it.
You're against it.
I'm against the position.
Just a position statement, so it has no real force or effect, so.
It's kind of odd because I agree with you against the B+30. It was voted down, and it's like they're just wanting to have it hang around. I guess what this is a different path, other than, gives you a different path than a academic institution. So it's odd. If you're against B+30, I'm not quite sure whether you would be for or against this, because it's not really a question on the B+30.
It's continuing education. Why do we need a position statement on continuing education?
It's like, if we one day pass a B+30, would you agree with using continuing education to be the 30? And if that ever happened, maybe you
The
would.
next step that would be then, well, we don't even
Let's
need a
do it.
bachelor's, let's just do ALDs for everything. It's useless.
I think they're trying to soften the 30. and they say B plus 30.
What was the discussion at the regional meeting on this, Robert?
Wow.
I don't think they really discussed, they just got up and said, hey, we're going to make it to where you don't have to have a master's degree, if I remember right. Because of the B, they said the B plus 30 is going to get it. Well, let's go back history, and I'm
Yeah.
not trying to,
Yeah.
I'm going to advocate for one a little bit here in a second, but, or I'm part of this. So the position was that since the number of credit hours for engineering has gone from 132, and I'm 112 or something, that there is a degradation of the engineers coming out of school, that they don't get all of their coursework. And so the solution to this was to say, okay, you need to take more engineering courses post getting out of school to become a real engineer. And that got shot down because the master's degree is not seen as the end-all be-all because it really narrows you down, right? I mean, a master's degree in something narrows your focus to a small segment of what your field is. And it's an expensive endeavor and a lot of other things. So that got kind of kicked to the road. There was one person, I think he's from Oklahoma, that was really passionately invested in this, and if it's Oklahoma, Nebraska, it's somewhere west of the Mississippi. I don't think it's California. I think it was Midlands there, but really has pushed this for a long time, and still may be on some level. So the question we have to ask ourselves, though, is do we think that the graduates we get from engineering school are getting enough of the enough education to be competent engineers? And I think we took a position not long ago where we were worried based on the ABET rule that says they could go to 96, 90.
I think it's gone down to, it's in the 120s, maybe 124.
But they said they could possibly go
That's
to
what
that.
Dr.
And we were
Smith,
kind of,
that's what Dr. Smith was saying.
right,
Is
but it did have it in the language was in there that said that at some point, I mean, again, we can, so, I don't know that necessarily I'm for, I agree, it's almost like continuing education. But we do need to ask ourselves as a board, are we getting applicants coming through here that need to have more than just the 4 years of education that they have right now? And would we feel more comfortable with our applicants getting 4 years? And I'm going to open up a can of worms, but I'll just open it up anyway. As we go to B plus 30, and we've talked about a bunch of stuff in here, so let's try to coalesce as quickly as my southern mouth will let me coalesce. We've talked about interviews post-test passing. We've talked about 5 years of experience instead of 4 if we decouple because there's some things that we may or may not be comfortable. I mean, I'm just telling what we've talked about, not what we agreed on, just what we talked about. So, on some level, we believe that the applicants that we're getting may be getting shortchanged on something, and I don't know what that something is. I would encourage us to probably vote against this because I don't know that this, again, I don't know that it attaches a certain thing, but I would also encourage us to be open to the strength of our applicants and what can we do as a profession to make sure that our applicants are as strong as they can be. When you look at it, and Chris can speak to some of this too, you know, some of the stuff that's being taken out of some of the proposed thing were some of the social science, and I'm terrible at all this, but there was, you know, less English requirements and less like sociology or something, like some of that stuff. And, you know, as engineers, we think that stuff's garbage. But guess how we, in general, Laura, we think that stuff's garbage, okay? But as engineers, but how do we communicate our ideas? It's through English, it's through writing, it's through understanding the built environment that we're in, and again, so I'm agreeing with you, just calm down. I'm agreeing with you.
Didn't even move.
You
Did I
got-
say-
you got pissed off,
No,
though.
no, I was looking at you. I was trying to understand.
But,
What kind of
so,
coverage it was.
so, and some of the schools have tried to do this where they're really trying to merge things together to make them all part of one class and all that. And are they getting there? I don't know. I mean, that's, you know, I worry sometimes that we're making really technically savvy kids that can't speak. And speak good, yes. And, you know, some of this, what I see in this, helps us to get further down the road towards some of those softer skills that frankly our universities are probably, because of budgets and all kinds of other reasons, are not allowing or not pushing or not something. And it's going to be up to us at some point as an industry to say, we see this, this, and this as deficiencies in our applicants. How do we go fix this? And so I'm not trying to poo-poo this. I just think it's an attempt to try to be a little preemptive in that. But if we have no intention of passing this into our model law, from model law into what we do in the next 10 years, there's no reason for us to vote for it, to make it a part of our, you know what I mean? Because it just hangs out there, and every year we get to go, oh, we're going to include this? Well, no, we're not going to include it. Well, you voted for it, but, I mean, so.
Yeah, but does us voting against it hamper somebody else from?
No. And I'm not opposed, I didn't say I was
Yeah.
opposed to voting. I just wanted you to know the,
I was just trying to think.
you know, I think it's a well-intentioned idea. I think it's not, we need to make an evaluation to, if there's something else that would be better to help our applicants get a little further along. And that's my 18 cents.
I'm comfortable if y'all want to wait. I'm the only one that's not going to Miami, right? Steve? I'm comfortable. If y'all want to see what comes up at the time, I'm comfortable with y'all hashing it out there.
Well, but just, let's do this on the straw poll, John, without really doing a motion. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
Laura, that helps while we're down there to say, you know, everybody generally opposed to this? I mean, generally, okay, so let's just, I mean, that way, if somebody doesn't come up with something that's,
I don't think I have a position on it.
well, that may
Quite
be,
frankly, I don't know that I'd have to
to.
listen to other, I don't think I do, so.
I
I trust you guys, you have my,
Okay.
yeah.
If
Is that
we
okay
could-
with everybody, Stephen, since you're not going to be there? Okay.
I think I'm comfortable not endorsing it, which, again, it's kind of confusing. Not really about B plus 30, it's about this ALD, accepting ALDs. But I'm comfortable not endorsing that because when you know, looking at courses for continuing education is one thing. But if you're looking at these kind of courses to decide who can become an engineer or not, it could get kind of all over the map, I think. So it just seems really messy to me. I think if they're going to do B, I'm comfortable saying if everybody thinks engineers need to do B plus 30, let's do it through the universities and not this extra coursework that who knows the quality.
This doesn't address who's going to make the determination what's acceptable and what's not, does
To
it?
us.
I guess so, it's the
It does.
That
states.
does open up a lot
Ugh,
of
that is
Yeah.
messy.
governance issues.
So,
Meetings will be twice as long, right, if we
Yeah.
ever adopt this.
In general, we have some, a little ambiguity, but some real concerns, questions, whatever. Okay, all right.
Move on. ACCA, and if you don't know the acronyms, they're at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It has all those spelled out. Motion one moves that a special committee on bylaws amend the bylaws to have more specific requirements for officers, specifically that to specify a person must be a licensed engineer or surveyor to serve as president-elect or vice president, and to state that the treasurer shall be a licensed engineer, surveyor, or public member. So it would open up that treasurer position to a public member of a board.
then that person could not go on and become.
Right, you have to be an engineer or surveyor to move up the chain of command. And the Board of Directors has no position on this. And I will say that both NCARB and CLARB do have public members who serve on their Board of Directors, and to a certain extent, they can move into those officer positions, but they also have a limit on that. Like to serve as president of NCARB, you have to be an architect. You can't be a public member.
And then an MBA couldn't.
Right. NBA could not either. Yeah, so I think it's in line with what the other organizations allow.
So do I understand this to mean that, like, Susan Maynor is our member at large?
Was our.
Was, excuse me.
Yeah.
So if she so desired, and we supported that, and then she, under this rule at the national level, that Susan Maynor could become the treasurer of,
Right.
Is that right?
Right, that's correct.
Okay, interesting.
On that?
Why we care, I mean,
Yeah. Thank you, Robert.
You know, the only reason we might care is because they're going to spend money looking at all this.
well, and that's again, I mean, and I know we have to have rules and stuff, I got it. But it seems like we spend a lot of time on these meetings going over the little changes to this and little changes to that, and don't talk about the future of our profession, and it just irks me a little bit, so.
You ever had a public member that wanted to go to one of these meetings?
Not in a long time. Yeah. But I do meet at these meetings on a frequent basis, public members of other
Yeah.
state boards. They do often attend, so this would give them the opportunity to serve on the Board of Directors if they so chose to move up.
Personally, I'm not quite sure what the reason for restricting it is, but I'm sure there.
No
Sure.
position on that?
I'd vote
Not
no.
that I have. I
Ambivalent,
kind of
is that
would
the
know
position?
too. It just seems like a little bit more,
No as in do not endorse, or no
Yeah,
as in
no as
no
in-
position?
as in do not endorse, just on the face of it, do not endorse, because it seems to be another rule that.
He's thinking.
No, I know, but I after he said no position, Mr. King said,
Let's just say
Don't endorse.
I'm kind of with Robert.
No
It just
endorse.
Seems like there's a
Vote for a
lot
vote,
of.
so you don't know.
I thought it was a good change, but hey, that's just my opinion. But okay.
Then I
no, no.
definitely want to.
You're definitely, no, now, right?
Definitely no.
All right.
Thank
I think
you.
that swayed the entire board right then and there.
I just did that to.
All right, we're moving
adopt a
along.
firm
We're
position.
almost done.
All right, motion to, we're not almost done. We
Let's
got
have more pages.
No, but those are on the
I'm not going
consent.
through all of them.
Yeah.
All right, motion 2 under ACCA.
Yeah.
This is a little more significant, I think you'll agree. Move that a task force be established to consider the qualifications needed to serve as president-elect, to determine the details of the nomination process, including the potential of reestablishing a nominating committee, and propose a transition plan. Basically, they want to move from a regional zone rotation selection process to where you would select the president-elect based on qualifications. Right now, that position rotates among the zones. It's how it works, right? I think right now, is it the central zone that?
Is Turner or is he just the?
Oh, that's right, Dan Turner is the
Turner's
current
guy.
president.
He's the guy.
So right now, it's the southern zone's turn to have a president, and it'll rotate to another zone for next year, so I don't remember the rotation.
What's the point of
but-
that? Obviously, somebody's coming up in rotation that they don't want to have on the board.
I would
so-
guess that there's got to be some desire to introduce politics to the process.
Board does not endorse this,
I know, I saw that.
so,
So where's that coming from?
yeah, it's coming
What is
from
the
someplace
ACCA
else.
committee? What is it?
What's the
Just tell
scoop,
us.
Mr.
Oh, that
Cochran?
is the scoop. I don't really know the
What's the scoop?
scoop.
There's gotta be
But
scoop
that is the
It's
advisory.
got to be personal.
Advisory Committee on Council Activities. Well, actually, I think that they are following the process that's utilized by a majority of similar organizations, at least for the design professions, both NCARB and CLARB and CIDQ as well. You're elected based on qualifications. There's no zone rotation like what NCAAS utilizes. So that may be part of it. They're just trying to be more.
How long
in
has the,
line.
do you know, how long the rotation system has been in place? That, okay, because obviously it was put in place for some reason. Why would it come back out?
Well, I would assume it's just to ensure that
Everybody got stayed hooked to the wagon, so it's
equitable.
there.
But and I will say for NCAR, but the last few presidents, I mean, you know, they're usually either from the southern zone or the western zone. They tend to dominate.
I was going to say, what you would end up with is a domination by certain zones, and is that really what you'd want to have happen
I
here?
suspect a similar thing would happen with NCAAS. The majority of the presidents would end up being probably
Just
from
have
the
to go
south
through
or
that
the
whole
west.
candy bar thing.
Because
all
we have a
over
lot
the
more
place.
licensees.
We might get better snacks out of this, but I don't know that there's anything else. I think this sounds kind of,
So a couple things, one of the things that was at the meeting, there was some discussion about, we're asking people to use qualifications when they talk about engineers, but we really don't. I mean, again, that was a argument. That wasn't, I don't think, the primary argument, that we should at least have some qualification criteria for the people we're going to have in our leadership if we're asking people that use engineers to have a qualification thing. And I think there was some fear that there, and I don't know if this is, I never got the vibe that somebody coming up, or I think there, and then it could have been somebody in the past, who knows, that there was some fear that somebody could get elected just because they showed up, you know, and they had very little experience in doing this. I mean, you can get a variety of people based on, you know, that have been I mean, people that show up at these NCAAS meetings, you know, some of them have been off their state boards for years, but they're part of their zone leadership, or, and so, you know, they're the treasurer or the this or the that. Yeah, I'm not making this up. So, I mean, there's a part of
a lot of
that
history there.
that there may be some validity to at least studying the thing and coming back and
So
seeing.
all this says is this, they will put a task force together. It doesn't say
Right, and I think
that
that,
Not
they'll
amending
take away the
bylaws.
zone or not zone. It just says it's a task force to consider qualifications and the nomination process. I don't think I'm opposed to that.
I mean, I think to quit the task force and hear what they come up with,
Yeah.
I mean, they may have a better way to split the,
It's
Maybe.
like everything else at NCAAS, it's one little step at a time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is just the
I
task
agree.
force.
So we'll all be dead before this
Yeah.
is decided.
Just, yeah,
So
yeah.
endorse. Is that what it sounds
We
like?
don't care.
Endorse.
Yeah,
No
endorse is
position?
The task
Endorse
force.
is fine.
we'll let
Because more
Kathy
people-
punch the button on this one.
And Kathy, you can be on the task force and see how really slowly things change.
All right. So, all right, moving on. All right, page 2 on your spreadsheet. This is from the Member Board Administrators Committee, and I urge you to support this motion. Move that there be a joint zone interim meeting in 2020. There you go.
Okay.
Summary.
Tell us why.
Well, so this, the issue for this is, they thought, there's already some combined meetings, like we had one this past year, and there are other, and it would, in theory, reduce the number of trips, because I think, and really the MBAs are the ones that are having to go more places, and the restriction on travel is, so if you have 2 meetings during a year instead of 3 or 4, which you may end up at, if I'm not mistaken, that would be easier to, you know, quote, sell 2 meetings as opposed to 3. There was some thought that you would get better cost on your venue because you were bringing in everybody. So evidently they're getting better cost when it comes to their annual meeting as opposed to their zone meetings. You would have better participation, that kind of thing. And there was still going to be time for breaking out the zone. So the southern zone would still meet and talk about southern zone stuff. The northern zone, just like they did at the
It's just
one
gonna
down
be
there.
like an annual meeting.
It's going to be an annual meeting
Yeah.
and with zone, and it, you know, and it may actually have to be a day longer, although I'm not confident why they have to be as long as they are, but that's another issue. So, I mean, the consensus was, I voted for it because I thought, you know, I'll try anything once. So this is 2020, which is our 100-year anniversary, or 50 year, some, it was some
Just
anniversary.
feels like 100.
Okay.
Seriously, 2020 was some anniversary.
Didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know what anniversary it was. Yeah, so maybe the 50 or something, it's not it wouldn't be the 100th. Engineering didn't come into,
Started in the 20s, but I'm not sure.
well, whatever, it doesn't matter.
I have to get my history of NC book out.
But there was some anniversary that they thought that would make some sense. And then you had people saying, well, we were supposed to have the zone meeting in our state, blah, 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 and they had something they were going to try to work through, and, you know, to me, whatever. I
But
mean,
it's only for 1 year they're talking
Just
about.
1 year, right.
And
On a
John
trial
wants,
basis.
and John wants to
John
say
wants to
yes.
do it, and
Yeah, I want to do it.
Let's
Endorse.
support John.
Let's do that.
So, and so that leads to this kind of discussion, and the discussion was, literally, why do we have 2 meetings to begin with? I mean, if we're going to do this, why don't we have a zone meeting at the first day of the annual meeting and, you know, spend a couple good sessions talking about zone things,
And then when you're fresh
and then go into the annual meeting with a day to discuss it, and you're really eliminating a crap load of other stuff. But
I'll tell you, the way it's supposed to work.
I know, you're supposed to do
yes.
motions and all that.
Well,
but-
yeah, and this is the way NCARB does it. I'm not holding them up as the model for everything, but I think they do this right. At NCARB, the regional meetings, they actually have the draft language of the motions for everybody to review, the resolutions as they call them. So you have actual language there to look at and discuss, and frequently they do make changes to those resolutions as a result of discussions at the regional meeting. But the way NCWS does them, you don't usually see the exact language. All you see is a PowerPoint where they summarize, here's the motions we're going to present, but there's no details in most cases. There are some exceptions. Sometimes they do show you specific language. So you really don't have the opportunity to provide the meaningful feedback that I think you could have if they would modify the way they present the material.
My point is, in its current configuration, there's no reason we couldn't meet a day
I
early.
think currently you're right, yeah.
mean,
So, okay. So, on this particular one, our MBA has asked us to support.
So we're going to support.
We're going to support it. That's my
100%.
100%.
All right. Moving on then, thank you for your support of that motion.
Enthusiastic
UPLG,
support. Stop
UPLG,
stirring the pot, Mr. Gothard.
yeah. Motion 9, all right. This is moving that the seals rule be amended to provide clarity regarding both physical ink and digital methods of signing and sealing professional engineering and surveying documents. And you have the proposed language there, and you may want to actually refer to the full motion there so you see the complete text of that rule as it would be amended. That's on page 19 of the following document. Not page 19 on your iPads, but page 27 on the iPads. Oh, and it also removes the requirement that a registrant must obtain a seal. Just says they may obtain one, because, not all PEs use their seal, so I think that's a positive change.
Problems with that one? Okay. Ooh. Endorse.
Now, here's the really controversial motion. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on this one. From the Western Zone, they are moving that a committee on bylaws be charged with amending the bylaws to give member boards regulating 2 professions, both engineering and surveying, 2 votes, and member boards regulating 1 profession, either engineering or surveying, 1 vote. Illinois would be allowed to retain 3 votes since they currently have 3 separate boards. They have a structural engineering board as well as engineering and surveying. The current bylaws provide one vote to each member board, and the Western Zone feels that the current model does not reflect the constituents served by the member boards, and that providing 2 votes per state would be more equitable. This is very similar to a motion presented by Ohio, I think in 2013. You may remember this, Robert, or Ricky, were you around then? I think you were.
All sounds familiar.
Yeah, Ohio presented a motion to allow 2 votes per state. So it's very, I don't know how they handled Illinois in that case, but very similar to that motion, which failed miserably, I think, as I recall. So this is sort of a revised Ohio motion. So we would, our board would only have 1 vote, of course, and the Tennessee Surveyors Board would have 1 vote.
And that would
then
stay the same.
Joint boards would have 2 votes.
And that would stay the same.
Right, that would stay the same.
For us, it doesn't matter, it would not change
Right.
R, but it would, for those,
I think the majority of states, I think, do have
and they only
combined
get 1
boards.
vote right now.
So by default, we get 2 votes
We
anyway.
get 2 votes and they get 1.
We have an engineering vote and a surveyor's vote. So our state,
Tennessee
our
does.
state has 2 votes.
Right,
2 votes.
exactly. Every state will have at least
And
2 votes.
states that have combined boards have
Except Illinois.
1 vote. I got you. Well, I think it stays the way it is because we have twice as much power as everybody else.
Well, that's given the false impression that the surveyors and us never.
Do we ever agree?
We vote on most things together.
Yeah.
That was being,
We're being funny?
that was being funny. That was my nod to jocularity at the moment. Well, so why do we oppose it, Mr. Campbell?
Because we want 2 votes and we don't want everybody else to have them.
We're here for the citizenry of Tennessee, right?
That's the oath I took.
Not for the equity of the.
So what's your position?
You don't want there to be, I don't want there to be extra votes.
Do not endorse. Do not.
endorse.
Not indoor, okay.
Well, I do.
How many boards, I mean, and then the other thing is,
That's not. a
could
good-
you, how many boards could you come up with? I mean, so we could split off into the civil engineering board and the
Yeah, what is it?
structural
What is that?
engineering board and the geotechnical engineering board, and, I mean, seriously, I mean, and I reckon you could go get 32 votes if you went down this path. I mean, it's all right the way it is. I don't know that we've had any huge vote swings because somebody had 2 and somebody had
Consider
1.
razor-thin margins at these things? No?
That kicked on.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
little
that was
bit.
close.
And then the fee thing, getting the fee through.
contentious and emotional and basically. Defer, because we can't agree.
No, there's not.
No?
I think so.
Here's some data for you that's interesting. There's only 14 states that currently have 2 or more boards representing engineering and surveying independently, Tennessee among them. And 41 states currently have 1 board representing engineers and surveyors.
Who are the 14 states? Do you have that list?
No, I don't have that list. I know a few of them. I know Texas has 2 separate boards. Let's see.
So,
But we should get outvoted 36 to 28.
I was going to
right?
say, I don't think it's going to matter too much what we say on this one, although we can vote twice. So.
All right.
Well, they don't let you do that, I'm trying.
But no, I bet if we can get the surveyors back.
But that's the 28.
Yeah.
I'm fine with going against this just for the people of Tennessee, like you're talking about, more power. But if there are states out there that really think this is unfair, then this should probably, at some point, result in them creating probably 3 boards per state, like Illinois has, eventually. So this position could push us that way. That's the other side of, I think, the issue.
See what happens during the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, consent agenda.
On the consent agenda, most of these, are just, a lot of them are housekeeping. I don't think they're going to be controversial, although sometimes it's surprising what motions get pulled off the consent agenda, isn't it? Yeah, you wonder. But a few that I'll point out, Oh, yeah.
That was pulled
That was a
off.
big-
Is there anything
consent.
else on fees? Any other opportunity this time?
No,
for-
not on fees. I didn't see
It
any
would
motions.
just be nice for there to be another opportunity to spend some of that.
Oh, well, no, there is one I'll
Yeah,
point out.
I think
But
the
there was
deal,
a study,
one.
something, I thought.
I think they have something in here that says.
That was endorsed.
We can't do something that changes the budget from the floor.
From the floor,
It's
that's
got
right.
to go back to the finance
I've
committee.
got that
Oh,
separate.
yeah, I remember that one.
ACCA motion 3, it's on
Yeah.
page
I bet you that'll
7.
get pulled off.
Yeah, that one I thought y'all might want to discuss.
Yeah.
This one moves that Administrative Policy 8 and Financial Policy 7 be amended to require that any exam fee changes proposed by anyone other than the Finance
Yeah, I
Committee be
remember this.
referred to the Finance Committee for review and revision before it's presented for a vote at the next annual meeting. So
Yeah, I
put it off for
I-
a
I
year.
What
don't
number
like
was
that
that?
That's ACCA motion 3 on page 7.
That's been, they started talking about that last time. Yeah, that's, I don't like that one.
A lot of people that weren't happy about that exam
I
fees,
know.
those
But
fees
you know
being
what?
reduced
It was
last year.
kind of best thing we did that time.
Back at you now.
I don't like that one.
So,
I like that one pulled off.
let's, just real quick, just to give you something else that happened. They kept talking about this exam fee thing, and they kept talking about the number of, and I'm gonna get some of the story messed up, but that the revenues were gonna go down next year. But they showed that revenues from exams were actually going to go up. And they showed that revenues from every category were going to go up. The only thing that went down was there was it's almost an administrative bucket or something that went down, or other things. I can't remember the whole story. And so the guy asked the question, and rightfully so, are you not capturing all the costs for exams? Because if we've lowered the fee and the exam revenue is still going up, but this other thing over here is going down, then why is that? And the discussion in the back of the room seemed to be somewhat apparent that NCAAS may be having some lost leaders out there. Either they're not absorbing their cost, so some part of the exam fee is not included in the revenue or the expense, or they've got some stuff out there that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing because they're losing money at it. Now, I don't know what that, again, he showed, and it was everything for NCAAS was going along fine and was above the line, and then you went to this one category and it just went, and that's where all the money was lost. And the question was asked, it was never really responded to, about why that other thing was like that. So that may come up again this year, and you wonder if it's some of the stuff they're doing where they're trying to propagate exams to different people that are not being captured. I don't know, but there's a lot of angst over the way NCAAS is spending, and the exam fee thing is one of the issues because you sit there and look at it, and on its surface, it's not a big deal, but then when you look at the budget, they start talking about it's Armageddon and we're going to lose all this money. But then when you look at the line called fee revenue, it's actually up. So something's goofy. And several people made that point, and it didn't get quite addressed.
Interesting, so a lot of other similar associations, they have these planned deficits. I mean, they're pulling from their reserves because they build up their reserves for that purpose for years when they have these planned deficits due to changes in the exam structure or whatever. They can absorb that lost revenue, but have more of this mentality, we have to always have a huge surplus. Can't remember an occasion where they had a planned deficit. You might, first glance, think, well, that's irresponsible, but not if you plan for it. I mean, there can
Right.
be occasions
And you
where that's
have it.
very appropriate.
Right.
So,
You plan to replace your air conditioner at your
Right.
house every
yeah,
Right.
right.
Save your money up.
So,
Try.
anyways. All right, so y'all are against that one then?
Pull that one out.
Yeah.
Move that it be
Take it,
taken
I'm
from the
sure that'll
consent agenda.
probably be the first one taken
Yeah.
off the consent agenda.
Let's vote. Let's
Underneath
vote
it,
on that.
the one underneath it is similarly worded. Seems like very, very similar language that's trying to
That one's specifically model law and rule language, not policies. So that,
LG 115.
yeah, that one, I feel okay with that, just because I think have several, more than one committee or certainly an individual vet those changes.
But to Kathy's point, though, why shouldn't, if somebody wants to bring that up, why obstruct it? The discussion would shut it down.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems restrictive in nature.
Right.
I mean, you're saying that y'all can't talk about that unless you start with us first. And we're the ones who are in charge, and so you got to start with us. Same way on the Finance Committee.
Well,
It does parallel.
Yeah, the problem, and I'll take the other part about the Finance Committee that came about, but the second one was because a rule change in one affects the other, and so you end up with something that may get passed from the floor here that's not reflected in the change in the other, so these two have to kind of work a little bit more in concert, the way that it's structured. Now, that's the explanation. I don't know that it's the end of the world if it gets discussed. Whereas the finance thing, I mean, if you reduce it by $50 on the fly, they were able to say, well, we're going to lose $2 million. I mean, it wasn't like somebody had to sit there and go through well, how does it affect this and where does it come from? I mean, but these two seem to be a little bit more interrelated because of the operating procedures versus the bylaws. So there may be a little bit more validity. Now, again, discussion of it's different, but
I agree. The laws and rules from the floor is really difficult to get the right language. If you've ever done any bylaws or anything, because what you end up doing is nobody remembers that 4 years ago you used to have that language. There was a reason you took it out, and now you're going against consistency and you're creating a lot of inconsistency. So I see the rationale behind those being pulled out, looked at in totality.
This is not saying that you can't amend a UPLG motion to amend the model laws and rules. I think you could still amend their motions.
you just can't make up one of your own that's got no.
But you could propose a motion to that committee to have them consider adding some language. So
Most of them are model law. There's
a lot of it's related to
Some of which we've
surveying.
turned,
Yeah,
looked
adding
at before.
definitions. And the last two on the spreadsheet, I thought y'all might want to discuss because it's UPLG motions 11 and 12. It has that language that Robert objects to. Experience credit for a graduate degree cannot be earned concurrently with work experience credit. So, heartburn about that language last year.
I mean, and we've discussed it. I think it's difficult for an applicant to prove, but at the same time, if somebody's working, 32, 40 hours a week, full-time job, and then they're going to get a master's degree at night, I mean, great for you to be able to do that. I would prefer they be able to document that, and that is somewhat difficult, but it can be documented via timesheets from employers and paste, whatever. There's a way to go do that. I just don't like to. I like for you to be able to count both. I mean, if you've put in a full-time job and you've getting a master's at night, and I don't know why you can't count both. And I understand there's some difficulty.
And this wouldn't affect us because it's
But it's model law.
model law.
We actually discussed, I think, last year adding that to our rules.
We did.
But y'all decided,
Right.
no, we don't. We want
Right.
to have the
Right.
ability to allow them.
So we as
To do
a
that.
state don't
Right.
ascribe to this,
Right.
but that's, yeah.
So I didn't know if on that basis you wanted to oppose these, or if you're just,
I don't think we get many of these that it makes that much difference.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just hate to
No.
take somebody in.
y'all have others you want to discuss.
Thank you. Y'all all set for that? Okay. Last thing is engineering exam results. Mr. Cothran.
All right, that's on page 35 on your iPads. This is just for your information. These are our spring results. So we're doing good on the FE exam results. This is January through May 2017. I haven't actually looked up the numbers for June, July yet. But just based on this period, the numbers are continuing to rise as far as those that are taking the FE exam. You see, there's been a steady increase since 2014, which is when the exam went to computer-based. It has been slowly increasing. Now, not all of those who pass do apply for a certificate. Some of them go to other states, and I think many of them just never even apply for an engineer intern certificate. But they'll take the exam. And of course, we had our law for engineers amended this year to remove that requirement for them to obtain an engineer intern certificate to become a PE. Now it just says they have to pass the FE exam. But one thing I want to draw your attention to is University of Memphis. I was happy to see this. The number of seniors sitting for the FE exam there has gone up significantly. They had 22 seniors sit last year. This year, you see, they had 80 just for this period, just for the spring. So that's a big improvement. And I think that has something to do with Ricky and I speaking at the University of Memphis last year, wasn't it?
All you, John.
Yeah. It was Tim Herndon, actually.
Moving out of it. It may have something to do with Philip Lamb moving out of it.
That could be,
He
yeah.
may have him intimidated or something.
Yeah.
Boy, the civil pass rate is, 48%?
The FE candidates in 2014, 326, and the FE candidates in 673. That's a really big number.
Going from 326 to 481 to 673.
Yeah.
Good.
I think there's a chance
The pass
that
rate is
in the
low.
next year or two, we may get back to our pre-CBT levels.
What were they?
Now, we've got more students now than we did then, but
CBT.
computer-based testing,
Oh.
yeah,
MBA speak.
yeah.
No, not for him. For the first year, that's what I thought y'all were talking about.
I
Good. Let somebody else
saw
know.
MBA form and I
Said,
was,
what?
I've got one of those, should I go to that thing?
Right, exactly. I was like, well, that's really odd. I know,
I thought, whatever.
yeah. Any other questions about the exam results? All right, since we went out of order, we are done with old and new business. Any other new business? Any other old business? Any other business?
Oh, one thing I was going to report on.
I knew you'd have something.
Yeah,
I knew it.
I got a report submitted by Lance Kinney. He's the director of the Texas Engineering Board. On the last Board of Directors meeting, NCAAS Board of Directors meeting, the MBAs, they always have an observer that attends, and they send us kind of a summary of the meeting. He made a comment when they did a report on ABET at that Board of Directors meeting that there's discussion about ABET setting a minimum number of hours required to graduate, and the discussion is setting that it may be 120 or 128 hours. So I thought that was interesting, that is being discussed. So that's a long way from being adopted, of course. They would have to request public comments and so forth. There's a long process for that to be implemented, but I thought that was good to know that they're at least discussing that. It's recognized as a need, I think. So there you go. So that letter that we sent really did the trick, I think. It was that letter that Ricky drafted.
Scared them.
Ricky.
Yeah, we intimidated them.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, we're gonna, the one that's
That's for next time.
next time.
We talked about it.
That will be discussed tomorrow at the,
Did you want to talk? Have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll miss being with y'all tomorrow. Enjoy.
No, we don't know yet.
This regularly scheduled meeting of the Continuing Education Committee of the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners is taking place in room 1B of the Davy Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. And notice of this committee meeting was posted on the board website on July 28th, 2017. Just by so saying, I'm calling this meeting to order,
Roll call?
and I believe we need to have a roll call.
All right. Susan Ballard?
Here.
Ricky Bursine?
Here.
Blair Parker?
Here.
Frank Waxter?
Here.
Catherine Ware?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And I didn't, has everybody got a,
Oh, I'm sorry. Does everybody have an iPad?
bring it up here?
If they need, someone can have mine.
Do we have an extra one? Can y'all share? Oh, you got one? Okay, we're
What
good.
page are we on?
37.
37.
Mine's still,
Waking up. Here, we'll share.
I can go through these if you
okay,
want,
if you
since
would, if you
I
don't
kind of
mind.
drafted a lot of this language since I've...
I've got it, there's a picture of an apple, so.
No. Yeah, I've been working with these rules since they were adopted, so I'm probably the most familiar with them. And I sent them to Liz, and she's reviewed them as well, so we've had some other... But basically, we tried to capture what you all had determined previously you wanted to change in the continuing education rules. And in drafting these, I did look at the NCAAS, the NCARB, and the CLARB model language. CIDQ doesn't really have model language anymore. They stopped updating that quite maybe 10-plus years ago, but I did have those models to look at. So tried to not just totally scrap the old rules and start over. The main change was that we, instead of just having one basic requirements rule that applied to all 4 professions, we broke it out to have a different rule for each profession now. So we have a separate requirements rule for architects, for engineers, landscape architects, and interior designers, because it appears that the professions are diverging now, where each wants to go a slightly different direction with the requirements. So that's the reasoning behind that. The first rule, on page 37, Rule 012005.01 purpose, did not modify that at all. The second rule, definitions, the only proposed change there is amending paragraph 4, professional development hour, that definition, by simply adding some language from the NCARB model language that's, I think, currently in our alternative rule, that PDHs may be acquired at any location. If the provider prescribes a customary time for completion, then such prescribed time shall, unless the board finds that to be unreasonable, be accepted as the registrant's time for PDH purposes, irrespective of actual time spent on the activity. So basically, we would just accept the PDHs identified on the certificate or whatever documentation they had for an online course or whatever. So any comments on that? No? All right, this third rule, continuing education review, did not modify that at all. Then, of course, basic requirements, that current language was completely struck, and we have a new 012005.04 rule for architects. And our understanding was that the architects wanted to adopt the NCARB model, basically do away with the old system where you would report your hours for the 2 years prior to your renewal date, and just move towards requiring calendar years, calendar year reporting for hours. Is that correct, Frank? Is that okay? So, all right, we're moving in that direction. This proposed rule would allow them to, well, first of all, it requires all 12 PDHs obtained in a calendar year to be in health, safety, welfare subjects in structured activities, And there is a phase-out provision for carryover hours. I'm assuming it, from previous discussions, you still wanted to, at least for a period of time, allow them to claim carryover.
Everybody was aware of what was going on.
Right, make sure everybody's been properly notified of that change. So this language, I wasn't sure about the timing for it. In the language you have, I was proposing that if they're renewing in 2018 or 2019, they could still report up to 12 carryover, and starting in 2020, that they would no longer be able to report carryover hours. But in thinking more about that, I think we probably need to move that up where 2021 would be the implementation date for phasing out carryover hours, because it's going to take about 9 months, as you mentioned in the previous meeting, Liz, for rules to become effective. So if these changes are approved for a hearing in October, I think we'll need to do a hearing on these. Yeah, not do them as proposed rules, because we've always gotten a lot of feedback when we make changes to the continuing education rules. So I'm sure it'll be the same here. It's probably more so here because we're making more significant changes than usual. So approve it for a hearing in October, hold the hearing probably in December. So they might, I'm thinking with that 9-month time frame, probably September 2018 might be the earliest effective date for the rule. So it's going to be late 2018. So I'm thinking probably for 2019 and 2020, to give them a full 2 years notification of the change, they could claim carryover hours, and then starting in 2021, that's when we would phase them out. Does that sound reasonable, you think? Yeah. I think that's more reasonable than what I originally proposed in the rules. I will point out, though, although for architects this would only be for a couple of years, 2+ years, allowing carryover. If you do allow carryover with the calendar year provision, then it's not really calendar year reporting, because they could work it where they only have to obtain hours every other year, basically. So not truly 12 hours a year if you allow the carryover, but we're phasing that out for architects.
So this is based on the NCARB model. So if we get feedback, we're just saying we're following what NCARB is doing.
Right,
correct?
and the
Okay.
majority of architecture boards have gone this direction, is my understanding,
And
12 hours a year.
Just a refresher as to why the rule process takes so long. It goes through an internal routing process first that goes through the different levels of legal management, and then through the commissioner, and then externally it goes to the Attorney General's office, and then the Governor's office, then back to the Attorney General's office, and then it goes to the Secretary of State for filing. So with all of those steps, it
Hopefully not.
I think since these rules are following the national model standards, we shouldn't have too much pushback on them.
And that's paragraph 1 of that proposed rule, and paragraph 2 simply imposes the requirements for individuals reapplying for registration, which we didn't have that in the alternative option language in that rule that's currently in effect, but we really need to retain that to make it so that closes a loophole where somebody can't just avoid the continuing education requirement by letting their license lapse and then reapplying. But it does allow them to, when they do reapply, they can either report their hours for the 2 previous calendar years, or if, say, they've been maybe out of the profession for some time and they are reapplying, and a lot of our applicants in that situation, they may obtain all their hours in like the 2 weeks before they reapply. This would give them that option as well, where it wouldn't necessarily have to be hours that fall in those calendar years. So either option would work for those that are reapplying. And we follow the NCARB language defining health, safety, welfare subjects. That's just taken straight from NCARB's model. For architects, now the next, looks good. The next rule is for engineers, 012005.05, their basic requirements. And the first two paragraphs, are really the first four, I should say, are not that different from what we currently have in the rules. The only difference is we have that phase-out provision for carryover hours, and I guess there we would adopt the same language we were discussing for the architects, where it would be fully implemented in 2021. At that point, they would no longer be able to claim carryover hours. And we did add, as y'all requested, a calendar year option. That's in paragraph 5. That's a new section that we're adding for the engineers, which also has the phase-out provision for carryover. But we did not define HSW or change the HSW requirements, because that was discussed at the last meeting. You know, do you want to require all hours to be health, safety, welfare, and do you want to define them? And y'all said no to both proposals, so we followed your direction. So, are you stunned that we followed directions? Yeah. Any comments on that? Ricky's being awfully quiet over there.
Don't define it, how you evaluating it?
Well, we have that policy that Ricky loves, right? But
It's
not a
okay.
rule, so.
Right. It's, well, I was looking at,
And I should note on your iPads, behind the potential changes, you have the current rules for continuing education as well as the policies that have been adopted for continuing education. So the engineer policy is on there for health, safety, welfare. But as Ricky's noted, it's very broad.
yeah, I'm okay. That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's just to provide guidance, obviously, since it's not a rule. We can't bind that on anyone, but it can be helpful if people have questions, well, what would be considered health, safety, welfare? We can refer them to that policy. Landscape architects, Rule 6. Basically, it's very similar to, actually, I think it's identical to the engineer's rule. But I know Blair, at the last meeting, wanted to discuss perhaps increasing health, safety, welfare hours, right? Yeah. Okay. I kept them the same here, but you may want to discuss raising the amount that's required.
Well, personally, I would like to increase the health, safety, and welfare hours. I don't have that consensus from people that I've discussed, other landscape architects I've discussed. Everybody's very cautious about it, and frankly, I just think I need a little more time to discuss it with others, ASLA in particular, but right now, let's leave it as it is right now, but I will be in favor of shifting it up to.
Going to be at the ASLA conference in September in Knoxville? Okay, good.
The time to ask, isn't it?
I'm planning to be there as well, so.
CLARB's view on that? Do they normally go with 7 being health, safety, and welfare?
I don't think that their model specifies. I think they leave that up to each jurisdiction to determine the specific amount.
I will look that up tonight, because I'm surprised I don't know.
Oh, sorry, if I could just remind everyone to make sure that your light is on when you're speaking, just to pick up your voice on the recording, not like I just did. Thank you.
Would pushing the speak button force it on?
You can push speak. Yeah.
That helps.
Okay. Keep the health, safety, welfare requirement as is for at present, right, and then potentially increase it later. All right. But
Where is there, or John, do you know, is there health, safety, welfare policy for landscape architects as well in our policies?
There is, yeah, they have.
And they're
they have one for
different.
each profession.
For each one, they're different, okay?
But we still have the one out there for architects, which may need to be repealed, I think, if these rules go through. We probably need to repeal that because we define it in the rule. Now, we've kept it out there because not everybody has to follow that alternative option rule, so we've retained it. But once this goes through, we would probably need to repeal the one for architects. Remain for the other well, and maybe interior designers if we incorporate that into the rules. So, yeah, but we would keep them, I think, for engineers and for landscape architects. Anything else on landscape architects? You have the same calendar year option that the engineers have, phasing out the carryover.
It appeared to be exactly the same as engineering, the engineers.
Differences. I guess we could, if in theory, I mean, we could combine the engineer landscape architect, but I don't want to because, like you said, you may, at some point, you may want to raise the health, safety, welfare hours. So we probably need to keep them separate. I think it's cleaner to do it that way.
Yeah,
So,
I think it'd be easier to keep it separate.
yeah. At some point, you may diverge from the engineers, right? Or vice versa. All right. Rule 0120.05.07, registered interior designers. This is some wording that, well, the first four paragraphs are wording that I drafted, and I think it's very similar to language that we've already looked at. That's currently in the rules. We're not phasing out the carryover hours for interior designers. Susan decided not to move forward with that for the interior designers. So they'll be able to retain their carryover hours. So the main difference for them is adding paragraph 5. That's the alternative that allows them to report hours per calendar year, 12 per year. And that still does allow the carryover hours. And this is some language that Susan had sent me, which I think we're kind of in the process of tweaking that. But I think her desire was that for defining health, safety, welfare, we would incorporate the board's existing policy on health, safety, welfare for interior designers, which closely follows IDCEC, you had
Correct.
mentioned.
So
Yeah.
they had copied NCARBs on ours, which doesn't apply to us. So I checked with IDCEC, CIDQ, ASID, IIDA, and USGBC. Aren't y'all proud of me? I got all of those. Everybody has an overlapping, pretty much, except for USGBC, to follow what IDEC or IDCEC does. So that being the case, we need to stay with where we are, because when you read the paragraph they just sent me, said the subjects of these CEUs can include, but not limited to, codes, fire and life safety systems, sustainability, barrier-free, and energy compliance. It doesn't include historic preservation or insulation or structural. So we need to stay within our guidelines so that we don't have a conflict between what our board allows and what we have to report to our credentialing boards. So let's just keep it clean and simple, which is where it was, and be happy.
Other than that, looks okay, I guess, right? Remaining rules were just renumbered to accommodate the new rules that we added. And I think all of the following rules in our chapter would still apply to all 4 professions. I don't think they need any major modification. Not that I saw. Just looking at it from an administrator standpoint, to stay as they are. But one question I had for you is on the next rule, 0120.05, it would be renumbered as .08 conversion table. Right now, our rules grant 15 PDHs per semester hour of credit and 10 PDHs per quarter hour, but the NCAAS and the CLARB models, their guidelines, grant 45 PDHs for a semester hour and 30 PDHs for a quarter hour. So we're well below the standard that's been adopted by those national organizations.
So who does a quarter system anymore?
I don't know of any that does, but.
Adopted over 20 years ago. That, yeah, I'm just thinking about here in Tennessee, so.
I haven't
don't
seen
think
quarter
so.
hours in a long
Yeah, I
time,
think-
but
So, anyway, okay.
there's still that possibility, I guess, there could be a quarter-hour institution out there, so.
So the other two allow 45 hours, which is really a typical class time for the semester. So,
Like 15 is very low for a semester. I don't know, though.
That's what the difference.
Just go take the test,
Yeah.
be done.
I don't know that it would have much practical effect if we
we
raised
had
it.
that many that have used this.
I don't think there's too many that do, but it's not uncommon that
I have
people-
not had any in the 5 years from the interior designers.
For
Count
engineering,
college
we do
credit.
see it. on
Well, for
occasion.
engineering, we do see it, but if we're not going to do carryover, it's probably not going to matter. Because if you're not going to do the carryover, then you're not going to get 45 credits and then carry 20 of them to the next year, so it
I
kind of
don't think it has much practical effect if we
No.
raise it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that inconsistency. But
Say that again, John, because, most classes are like a 3-hour class would meet, let's see, three times a week, maybe
16 weeks.
typically.
Normally, a 3-hour course by our rules, that would be 45 PDHs, which might lead you to think, well, maybe they,
See, the 1 hour at 15 seems kind of right to me.
looking at the model that's been adopted by NCAAS and CLARB, it's 45 per semester hour.
Per semester hour, that,
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
I've never had any questions or complaints about that conversion, so it's probably really fine as it is, but I just wanted to
Corollary
point that
to
out
a
because
great
I was
inflation.
looking at the model language.
You're right, if it was a 1-hour seminar, I mean, you wouldn't go with 16 times.
Full credit, so,
Well, it says
for
one,
this quarter.
well, it says 1 hour, 1 semester
Okay.
hour. Doesn't say,
Okay.
it doesn't say it's a 3-hour course, it says 1 hour, which that's closer to the 15.
That's what I was saying, is it?
I think Dr. Smith worked on these rules originally when they were drafted back in 96, 97, so I think an educator actually drafted this language, so.
Well, it's possible
Probably in line.
if you were taking a 3-hour course, you could get 45.
Right. Yeah, with our current conversion. But it would be a ridiculously large number of hours, wouldn't it, with 45 per semester hour? You're
Yeah.
never going to be able to use all those hours.
Right.
At the 24 to get started, you could use.
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, Rule 012005.09, types of acceptable continuing education. Made one minor change there to paragraph 2L, the very last paragraph of that rule, right above credits. I added, unless otherwise noted, to the sentence that all such activities above must be relevant to the practice of architecture, engineering, landscape architecture, or interior design as determined by the board and may include technical, ethical, or managerial content. And I added unless otherwise noted because that could pose a conflict with requirements that require all hours to be health, safety, welfare related, like for the architects. In that case, managerial content would not count for your hours, so that's why I added that little disclaimer there. All right. See, the next rule, credits, no changes to that. Next rule, exemptions. That's where we added our paragraph allowing exemptions for hardships, for physical disability, serious medical condition, or other extenuating circumstances. They can apply for an exemption or extension of time, and they have to supply supporting documentation. Yeah. And I think that language was from NCAAS, I believe.
And to report this, you write a letter and just,
Job-related thing, or military, or a doctor, or something that proves that you cannot do your continuing education.
We could make it more specific as to what format, but I think leaving it a little bit open to interpretation would allow the board a little better discrepancy and more options, yeah. But I think typically we would request something in writing.
No other changes, we did delete, of course, the last rule, alternative option for architects and registered interior designers, because that's, would be obsolete, of course, with these changes. So deleting that rule. And it did retain the reciprocity provision in the last rule, next to the last in our current rule. Kept that, because that is utilized quite a bit by registrants. When they're audited, they will submit proof that they met the requirements in their home jurisdiction in lieu of sending us their certificates and transcripts and so forth. So it's been really helpful to the board staff in cutting down the amount of paperwork we have to sort through.
That does raise a question. Are there any states that don't do reciprocal acceptance?
Yes.
Well, some states, they require you to take pre-approved courses.
New York
and
and Florida.
yeah.
New York, you have to take courses that have been pre-approved by New York, period. They won't accept the fact that I'm meeting Tennessee's continuing education requirements.
Right. Yeah, and I think in Florida, they take the same thing. You just gotta, they won't, well, you're right.
Florida's the same way. They won't accept, I can't say, you've got to take their courses.
Yeah, you gotta have 2 hours of Florida-specific courses.
You have to take, I was thinking 4 of their laws and rules. And then it used to be 4 practice, but now it's more like 12.
I always make a trip to Florida. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Works out. But vice versa, do we accept from everywhere else? Okay.
As long as the other jurisdiction has continuing education requirements, which the majority do.
There are words
There are a
that
few
don't.
that don't. Oh, I don't know off the top of
Oh,
my
okay.
head.
Montana?
Yeah, and it varies from profession to profession. Yeah, there are a few that don't.
Maybe Nevada. I know there was one that doesn't.
I think they recently adopted it, but I'm not, they were holdouts for a long time, but I think they finally adopted it. All the changes that we drafted, so.
so may we go back to 0811 exemptions? The additional language E that we talked about?
Yes.
That covers if a person who may be out of the workforce temporarily, whether they're pregnant or have other circumstance, that would cover that as well, correct?
Extenuating circumstances, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, John, by adding the extenuating circumstances language, leaves it open to interpretation by the board. That way, when you receive an applicant for this exemption, you can decide whether that meets the board's criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, I will say that everything that, again, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but when we met in April, I guess, everything that I had written down that y'all were going to go over, you've gone over, and looks like to me you've done a good job of what we needed, so.
And I think it's to our advantage to add that Part E, because we do have people who went on maternity leave and then got pregnant again, and, with 2 kids and 20. The men start having the babies. We have to bear the burden, so.
That'll be fun.
I don't know how many requests we're going to receive. Hopefully, it's not going to be an overwhelming number, but
I will say that when rules go through the different phases, we're required to send out notifications to the licensees. So if they read their emails, they would see this updated option for an exemption. So we could see an increase, or we might not. But at least more people have the potential to be aware of it.
Well, if they'll at least pay attention to inactivate their license while they're gone on maternity leave or medical leave or whatever. The only other thing that do we want to say that this does not preclude them from a penalty on Part E?
Explain that.
Well, for instance, they send this, okay, can I discuss a case we've got? I probably can't, can I?
Disciplinary counsel is coming to assist.
Okay. Well, there's an individual who was staying with a relative that had been ill, and then she had, say, or someone significant other pass away. She did not get her continuing education. Yes, she had extenuating circumstances, but is that going to preclude her from not having a penalty? Do we want to talk about that in Section E as well, so we don't get a bunch of frivolous, applications?
I think you can, the way that, for the example that I can think of is in accounting. People don't hit their CPE. They have a mechanism where you I'm sure it's similar with this board. If you can go inactive, and and a lot of times I'll let the board know that during the disciplinary meeting to take it into consideration, but you are not exempt from not only civil penalties, but also penalty hours. And so it may be worthwhile they can consider, so people can't use it after a complaint's already gone through, they've never
Exactly.
responded, and they're like, oh, no, I'm in Florida, I'm inactive
Right,
now.
and that's my,
Yeah.
That's what comes to my mind, too, is another accounting example where we've got a licensee going into retired status, and then they were up for the CPE audit that year and then said, oh, I'm retired. Yes, but the audit was from before you retired, so you still have to meet the requirements.
do
We
we
can
need
certainly
to
add language
put
in
another
here.
sentence in there explaining,
Well, one point is, the way it's worded now, it says that the applicant may apply, and it says subject to the review and approval of the board. So if they apply and the board doesn't approve it, then
but people aren't
then
going to
there's
look at it that way.
penalties.
They're not going to think, that I'm going to get in trouble if I apply. They're going to think I'm going to get out of this if I apply. So, because that, just like the individual that's right here, she didn't even think about it, and then she tried to do the inactive thing, and it was too late. So,
The accounting language doesn't have anything express, because what we do is we'll say, well, at the time that you were due, you were active, so that your inactive status doesn't matter. But you're right, there is confusion. I have actually 4 open accounting cases where all of them try to
Okay.
go inactive after an audit.
Right.
And that's just for this period of time.
right. So,
So,
I don't know, do we want to add?
We could add some language, just some ideas off the top of my head right now, maybe adding something that said, application does not guarantee
Exemption from-
exemption.
exactly.
Something along those
Right.
lines.
Exactly. Yeah.
yes, or
Exemption from penalties. Okay, that sounds good. Because I don't want this to be a loophole. I don't want it to be an opportunity for someone to take a stand and take care of their business. My mom's in hospice. I had 3 sisters in a hospital in 3 different cities 2 weeks ago. Trust me, at a wedding, I had my plate full. But it didn't stop, when I had to take care of this project and this project and this project. I'm still responsible for all these things, but I don't want this to be a catch-all, where we end up in a bigger mess, trying to help people through a circumstance. So, anyway, I just think we need to say, like you said, doesn't preclude, can't talk today, preclude you from, any penalties or whatever, so.
Certainly edit the rule, and I think this was just an initial draft, so we'll probably make a few more detailed changes before the board votes that John and I had discussed. You have to share with everybody.
Probably not.
We'll wait till after the meeting.
But yeah, I'm happy to work with John and bring an edited version before the board.
I just
before
don't
the
want us
October
to
meeting.
try to be helpful and then have to step in it, if you know what I mean. So, anyway. So, because we've seen this, I'm going to go inactive after they get in trouble. And that's not the point of this. So, anyway.
Another thing, this has nothing to do with any of this, except it kind of does, but, I always felt that health, safety, and welfare it's the reason we're licensed or registered. And so I've always thought, well, why aren't the CEUs required in health, safety, and welfare, especially from a state board? And so, I've always felt, or I've always tried to get all of mine in health, safety, and welfare anyway. But I kind of get the feeling that a part of it is what's out there and what's available, as much as whether you need it or not. Because I know in your case, it's really tough to get
It is hard.
the interior people to actually have continuing education courses enough to meet the requirements.
I'm way behind this year. I'll be the first one to admit,
Auditing, so.
I do. So I'm good for last year. I'm just not good for this year, and it's August.
If this is something we need to communicate to the companies and the societies that do put on the continuing education, maybe we add the word to offer more courses in that area.
Continuing education on health, safety, and welfare,
You don't get any credit for serving on the board?
No one of us started.
Actually, add that to the exemption. Board members are exempt.
like Congress in their own health care, so.
For landscape architecture, I believe Tennessee ASLA does a fantastic job of assembling education opportunities, and we're pretty good about providing, I believe, in the west, middle, and east side of the state, we provide certificates that say who the speaker was, the hours, and so on.
We have those as well.
Yes. Exactly. One of my concerns, Frank, about health, safety, and welfare, and I agree with you, I firmly believe that as a design professional, we need to be updating ourselves. We need to learn. And as I get older, it would be really easy to say, no, I know everything, and, I'm not going to go to any courses or learn anything additional. And I think that's a very naive approach. But one of my concerns is something as simple as a tour. You go to let's say you go to a state conference, and you go on a tour of someplace, doesn't really matter where, but the point is, you're going to go see something about your profession, and it's arguable whether or not that's health, safety, and welfare.
See, that's the difference between the three.
Oh, Susan, I'm sorry, I don't think it's picking up. I'm sorry about that.
That's the difference between us. We have maybe 10 subjects that we can do health, safety, and welfare on, as opposed to you all, which allow a whole lot more.
Right.
And even things that overlap, like historic preservation is not considered health, safety, and welfare for us, but it is for you guys.
Well, just to continue a little bit more about a tour, you're in a group of people, you're in a group of like professionals discussing a design or an opportunity, and I think there's a lot of good that can come out of that, to go see someone else's work or something like that. So that's why I'm not in favor of requiring all of our hours to be health, safety, and welfare, because I believe that tours can be in a little questionable area.
Any other discussion? Ricky, you wait.
I am. I was just looking at the interior design, what they allow for health, safety, and welfare, and wondering, I don't know, for this board, the time you're putting in on it, we're here for health, safety, and welfare of the state. So why wouldn't that count for health, safety, welfare?
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's not the way it's written right now, so,
Well, it's a little general, because, it says under welfare that it's got to be about social, ethics, I don't know,
See,
it's
just the welfare by
kinda hard
itself
to
is not going to count. It has to be the health, the safety, and the welfare to get a full credit.
that right?
Our IDCEC.
Huh.
So, you can still count these as continuing education, but it has to be an HSW to get the credit. So. Safety and health don't fall under budgets and estimating, okay?
You don't think it's health, safety, or welfare?
No, it's
And?
Yep.
Huh.
I've ever known it to be that tightly defined, but.
For us, so.
Right. Well, why are y'all doing that?
I turned down an opportunity to be an officer on the CIDQ last month, so I just said I can't do any more right now. Y'all have to work. Then you're going to have a diverse opinion about what it is across the United States. So anyway, but as it stands right now, we have very limited classes that are approved. So.
Any other discussion?
I think I've done a good job. So.
Yes, thank you.
Vote on anything?
I see we have no old business.
Do we need to vote on anything?
What's the old business?
Yeah, this is old and the
Not
new
aware
and
of
the future.
anything.
No, I don't think we'll have a
Take the
vote
board.
since we're just bringing it to the board for more discussion.
Okay. All right. Do we need a,
There being no other business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
All right.